Prologue. Snow. In a stark white room deep in the second basement of the White Tower, Scene, a sitter for the White Arger, anxiously watched the heavy wooden door. Although she had woven a web of sidar around the entrance to detect any approach, her vigilance was born of illogical fear rather than practicality. The weave picked up only the distant sounds of rats, a disturbing sign of the tower's decay, and a potential source of the Dark One's spies. Her anxiety was compounded by the muffled whimpers coming from behind her, sounds she desperately tried to ignore by focusing on the political puzzle that had led her and her companions to this dire situation. She and others had noticed the heads of various ages, normally at odds in the fractured tower, meeting in secret. Scene had personally seen Farane Neheran of the White Ager whispering with Jesse Bilal of the Brown, and later walking discreetly with Swana Dragond of the Yellow. These clandestine meetings suggested a conspiracy that the 5 sitters in the room were determined to uncover, even if it meant breaking tower law. Unable to distract herself further, Scene finally turned to face the scene. Serin, of the Brown Arger, stood with cold anger, her hand on the dagger at her belt. Pavara, of the Red Arger, appeared outwardly calmer, but gripped the smooth white oath rod like a weapon, her determination palpable. Yukiri of the Grey Arger shivered, wrapping her arms around herself in fear, muttering about the severe consequences they would face if they were wrong, being unchaired, exiled, birched, or even stilled. Beside her, Dozine of the Yellow Arger, appearing more like a pretty boy than a powerful sister, was sweating with concentration as she manipulated the weaves flowing into the chair of remorse. On the chair itself, a large block of marbled grey material, lay the writhing form of Taline, a sitter for the Green Arger. Drenched in sweat, she was trapped in a vision Dozine had crafted, experiencing the consequences of a fabricated crime. Dozine revealed that Taline was being brutally flogged by Trollocs, with a myrdral and a boiling cookpot awaiting her, a torment designed to break her will. Yukiri's fear escalated, pointing out that using the chair on an initiate, let alone a fellow sitter, was forbidden, and that even the toughest criminal broke after 2 sessions, whereas this was Taline's 3rd. Pavara snapped back, reminding them that Taline had refused to re-swear the oath against lying, and had even tried to stab her when shielded, actions that screamed guilt. Serin, who had subtly assumed command of the group, cut the argument short, stating it was too late to turn back. Sane felt a prick of resentment at Serin's easy authority, a reminder that even in this clandestine rebellion, the tower's informal hierarchies held sway. As Talene's keening intensified, Serin ordered Dozine to bring her out of the vision. Once awake, Talene was a trembling wreck, her eyes wide with terror from the lingering memories. Pavara immediately thrust the oath rod at her, demanding she forswear all previous oaths and retake the 3 oaths of the Aes Sedai. Siren added a chilling threat, promising that the next vision would be the cookpot or the myrdral, with no awakening until it was over. Broken, Taline began to weep hopeless, shuddering sobs. She took the oath rod and mumbled the words to forswear all oaths that bound her, which was followed by an agonizing howl of pain as the bonds were ripped away. Her body convulsed violently before she collapsed, weeping like a child. Without mercy, Pavara forced the rod back into her hand and made her repeat the 3 oaths. Finally, they compelled her to swear a 4th oath: absolute obedience to the 5 of them. With the oaths freshly settled upon her, Siren asked the question they had risked everything for: if she was of the Black Arger. Taline's creaky affirmative answer froze Siane. The reality of confronting a black sister, a dark friend wearing the shawl, was a far more terrifying experience than merely believing in their existence. The nightmare was real and walking the tower halls. Their victory was shattered, however, when Taline claimed that Elida, the Amelin seat, was also Black Arger. She argued that the Black Arger knew every secret report and every decision Elida made, sometimes weeks in advance, which would be impossible unless she was one of them. While Pevera and Serin dismissed this, Believing Telaine was merely repeating a lie she believed to be true, the accusation cast a pall over their plans. Saren concluded they could not turn Talon over to Elida and must act alone to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy, starting with a group of rebel Aes Sedai that Saane and Pavara had already captured. As the others debated their next move, the weight of their discovery and the terrifying uncertainty of their path forward overwhelmed Siane, who staggered to a corner and was violently ill. In Kemlin, Elaine Trekand struggled with her own set of problems amidst a violent thunder snowstorm that mirrored her inner turmoil. Anxiously waiting for Nynaeve and Vandene, she felt the pressure of her recent formal claim to the Lion Throne of Andor. While Nynaeve was busy organizing the escape of kinswomen from Shonchan territory, and Vandene was secretly hunting the Dark Friend who had murdered her sister, Elaine desperately needed their political and strategic advice. With crime rising in the capital following the departure of the Saldean and Aiel forces, Elaine announced her decision to hire mercenaries and hunters for the Horn to bolster the Queen's Guard. Both her closest advisors, Delyn Taravin and Birgitte Silverbow, strongly objected. Delyn, a powerful high seat, who was herself a potential claimant to the throne, warned that mercenaries were unreliable and that relying on foreigners would alienate the populace. Birgitte, newly appointed Captain General of the Queen's Guard, reluctantly agreed, adding that hunters for the Horn were adventure seekers who would desert at the first rumour of their prize. Ignoring their counsel, Elaine asserted her authority and escalated her plans, commanding Birgitte to transform the Guard into an army capable of matching 10 noble houses by springtime. The command horrified Birgitte, who protested that she was an archer, not a general, nearly revealing her secret identity as a legendary hero of the Horn in her panic. Elaine, feeling Birgitte's mortification through their warder bond, quickly silenced her and justified her seemingly mad decision. She detailed the formidable opposition she faced. 6 powerful houses were already arrayed against her, and she could only count on 2 for certain. To avoid a bloody civil war, she argued, she had to become so overwhelmingly powerful that her enemies would not dare to fight. Her counsel was interrupted by the unannounced arrival of 2 Seafolk women, Renail and Zyda. They imperiously demanded that Elaine fulfill her part of the bargain made for the Bowl of the Winds by providing 20 Aes Sedai to teach their windfinders. Elaine's attempts to delay were deftly countered by Zyda, who negotiated a new, impromptu bargain for the Aes Sedai currently in the palace to begin teaching immediately. The tense meeting was again interrupted by the arrogant entrance of Mazrim Taim, the Mahail of the Black Tower, accompanied by 2 other Ashaman. The room grew smaller as Elaine, the Grey Sister Merilil, and even the Seafolk windfinder Renail instinctively linked and drew on Saidar for protection. Taim, dismissive and sneering, challenged Elaine's authority for removing the dragon banners from the city and establishing what he called a lawless compound. Elaine countered, asserting Andor's sovereignty and demanding the Queen's Guard be allowed daily access to the Black Tower. Their confrontation was cut short by the arrival of Nadere, an Aiel wise one who declared, "It is time." This was a summons Elaine knew she could not refuse, one which required her to come immediately and as a newborn child. To her profound humiliation, in front of Taim, the Seafolk, and her own advisors, Elaine was forced to strip naked. Shielded by a makeshift wall of the other women, she endured the mortifying experience before being wrapped in a cloak and led away by Nadere, who later confirmed that Taim had indeed been watching her. Elaine was brought to a bare room where she joined a similarly naked Avienda and more than a dozen wise ones for the ceremony to become first sisters. The ritual involved answering a series of deeply personal questions about each other, their words magically held and released together. They spoke of their admiration for each other's courage and pride, but also their criticisms, Avienda's reliance on violence and Elaine's use of her beauty to manipulate men. They revealed childish traits and, most painfully, their mutual jealousy over their love for Rand al'Thor. The ceremony culminated in them being forced to strike one another as hard as they could, a physical act meant to represent all future anger, before they embraced in tears. The ritual concluded with a shared mystical vision of being reborn together from the womb, waking in the arms of the wise one Amy's. In tears and laughter, they clung to each other, their bond as sisters irrevocably forged. Elsewhere, Tovine Ghazal, a red sitter, awoke to the grim reality of her captivity. One of 51 Aes Sedai captured in a disastrous expedition, she was now bonded to the false dragon Logain Ablar and held in the strange, burgeoning village of the Asherman. The place was a bizarre mix of mundane life, with wives and children going about their days, and the terrifying reality of hundreds of men who could channel, all enclosed by a massive, power-wrought wall that Tovane saw as a symbol of the White Tower's doom. While waiting for Logan, she was shocked to see Gabrielle, another bonded sister, emerge from his house, having clearly spent the night with him. Gabrielle calmly explained that she had surrendered to his lusts as a means of gathering intelligence. The men who served Logain soon arrived to make their reports, revealing fractures within the Black Tower. Logain was cultivating his own faction. There was concern about a new form of healing developed by Nynaeve Almiara, and, most significantly, news arrived that 7 full Asherman had deserted, including several of Taim's most loyal followers and others personally chosen by Rand. Later, alone with Tovane, Gabrielle laid out her analysis. The Black Tower was divided, and the 51 captive sisters had a unique opportunity to exploit these divisions. She argued they must first unite under a single leader, setting aside their Aja loyalties. Tovane agreed, already formulating her own secret plan to use this new alliance not just for escape, but to orchestrate the downfall of the Amirlin, Elida. Miles away, Rand al'Thor stood incognito inside the Academy of Carrion. He had orchestrated a chaotic flight from the Sun Palace after being attacked, and now moved in secret. He observed an inventor in the stable yard testing a steam wagon, a horseless vehicle that moved under its own power. Though the headmistress of the Academy was dismissive of such projects, Rand ordered their continued funding, hoping to leave behind something constructive to counteract the destruction he was fated to cause. He met with Lord Debrain, his steward in Carrion, and gave him secret orders to support Elaine's claim to the throne and to prepare another, unnamed man to rule Carrion. He was soon joined by Min, who had been gathering books. As they prepared to leave, Rand was struck by a sudden wave of dizziness, a new and alarming symptom unrelated to the sickness he felt when channeling. After opening a gateway to a remote, snowy location hundreds of miles away, he finally confided in Min. He explained that his recent, highly visible travels to distant locations were meant to lay false trails for his enemies, the Forsaken and the renegade Ashaman led by Dashiva. He then revealed his ultimate, audacious goal. He intended to cleanse the male half of the One Power, Saidin, of the Dark One's taint. He knew that once he began the process, he would be vulnerable and unable to stop, which was why he had to eliminate the renegade Ashaman first. Min, completely unfazed by the monumental and seemingly impossible task, simply promised to help him devise a better plan, leaving Rand to grapple with his secrets and the profound uncertainty of his quest. Chapter 1. Leaving the Prophet. The narrative begins with a sweeping description of a wind traveling eastward across the world, establishing the political and social climate of the lands it touches. The wind first crosses the ocean to Tarabon, where the city of Tanchico is under the control of the Shonchan. While the initial conquest brought fear, the city now experiences a period of peace and relative prosperity. The Shonchan have brought order, ending the previous anarchy and hunger, and though their customs are strange and their nobility demanding, for the common person, life has improved. The wind then moves on to Amador, the capital of Amadisha, which has also fallen to the Shonchan. Here, the mood is one of bitterness and subjugation. The citizens live in fear, avoiding the conquerors and their strange beasts, and resentfully watch as former children of the light are forced into manual labor in chains. The wind finally reaches the town of Abila, a place that exists in a state of grim tension under the control of Masema, the self-proclaimed prophet of the Lord Dragon. Perrin Ibarra emerges from a meeting with Masema, his anger barely contained. He assesses the prophet as a dangerous and powerful madman, whose followers fill the streets with a palpable stench of unwashed devotion, fear, and a shared, feverish insanity. These followers are a motley but devoted rabble who would commit any atrocity at Masema's command. Perrin's primary mission, given to him by Randall Thor, is to bring Masema to Caerhien. The central conflict arises from Masema's fanaticism. He considers it blasphemy for anyone but the Dragon Reborn to touch the One Power, and therefore refuses to travel through a gateway created by an Ashaman. This forces Perrin into a slow and dangerous overland journey of more than 400 leagues. Perrin's diverse and volatile party reflects the complexities of his situation. His old mentor, Elias Machera, recognizes the extreme danger they are in. The two Aes Sedai with him, Seonid and Masuri, are terrified after the meeting and quietly insist to Perrin that Masema must be killed, a sentiment they are quickly silenced for by the stern Aiel Wise Ones, Adara and Karel. Meanwhile, the Ashaman, Grady and Nield are grimly prepared for violence, and the former tinker, Aram, displays a disturbing excitement, finding a kindred spirit in Masema's absolute devotion to the Dragon Reborn. As they ride out of the desolate town, they are joined by Balwer, Perrin's secretary, who provides crucial intelligence. He delivers two significant pieces of news. First, the Shonchan have decisively crushed the Amadician army near the town of Jeremel, capturing King Aelron and his entire court, effectively ending Amadicia as a sovereign nation. He also reports that the White Cloaks who fought alongside them, led by Valda, managed to escape the rout and are most likely heading east, directly toward Perrin's location. The second piece of news is that the Shonchan have suffered a major defeat in southern Altara, where they were repelled by a force of channelers and driven back to the city of Ebu Dar. The news of this battle, which reminds Perrin of the horrific slaughter at Dumai's Wells, brings him a moment of grim satisfaction, but also underscores the escalating conflicts around them. For the moment, however, he sets aside the strategic worries, focusing instead on returning to his camp and to his wife, Fael. Chapter 2. Taken. Perrin Ibarra's return journey to the forest encampment is slow and arduous, hampered by treacherous frozen roads that prevent any real speed. As he finally reaches the camp in the mid-afternoon, he discovers a scene of alarming disarray and high tension. The designated campsites for Beralin's Mayana winged guards and Queen Aleandra's Gealdanin soldiers are abandoned in haste, littered with overturned equipment, a clear sign of a sudden departure. The only people remaining are non-combatants huddled near the supply lines. The true focus of the camp is a military standoff. 900 of Beralin's red-cloaked Mayana lancers are formed up, facing a similarly sized block of green-coated Gealdanin soldiers. The Gealdanin, in turn, are facing a rocky hill where Perrin's own Two Rivers men have formed a defensive ring, their longbows nocked and ready to fire. The atmosphere is thick with the potential for imminent violence. Riding into the heart of the confrontation, Perrin finds Berelain, her one-eyed captain Galene, her Aes Sedai advisor Anura, and Aleandra's first captain, a hard-faced soldier named Gerard Arganda, in a heated argument. Upon his arrival, Berelain addresses him with a chilling formality. She reports that while she, Fael, and Queen Aleandra were hunting, their party was ambushed by a large force of Aiel. Berelain claims to be the sole escapee and coldly states that Fael was captured, adding that it is uncertain if she or any others are even still alive. This news shatters Perrin's composure, and he erupts in rage, demanding to know why they are all standing idle instead of searching for his wife. Berelain's response is infuriatingly pragmatic. She explains that a blind pursuit into unknown territory against potentially overwhelming numbers of Aiel would be a costly and likely futile gesture without first gathering intelligence. As Perrin grapples with this devastating information, Elias Machera offers quiet counsel, urging him to maintain control and warning that rash actions will only lead to more death. Elias, along with Aram and the three warders, then departs to begin tracking the kidnappers, though Perrin senses the tracker's grim expectation of what he will find. In a desperate act, Perrin reaches out with his mind to the nearby wolf packs, pleading for their help. Their response is a profound blow. While they commiserate with young Bull for the loss of his mate, they cannot distinguish between the various groups of two legs and offer only the cold comfort that he should mourn her and wait to meet her again in the wolf dream. The political tensions then boil over as Arganda, smelling of rage and fear, confronts Perrin directly. Furious that his queen has also been taken and suspecting the Isle within Perrin's own camp, he threatens to interrogate them. Drawing on his new and uncomfortable authority, Perrin coldly reminds Arganda that Aleandra swore fealty to him, making him Arganda's lord. He commands the Gaeldanin captain to stand his men down and return to their camp, asserting that he will find Aleandra when he finds Fael. After a tense moment, Arganda grudgingly obeys. Once the immediate threat is gone, Berelin's demeanor shifts, and she attempts to reframe the situation as a romantic contest over him, which earns her a vicious snarl from Perrin, who has no patience for her games. On the hilltop, Daniel Lewin explains how he organized the Two Rivers men to defend the Ael from the aggressive Gialdanin. Perrin then pleads with Gaul and the Ael maidens of the Spear to find Fael, knowing they are the best trackers. They agree and depart immediately, their formation unusual in that they allow Gaul to lead them, a strange sign that Perrin belatedly realizes must be connected to the fact that Chiad and Bane were with Fael when she was taken. He briefly considers and rejects an offer from the Asherman to use travelling to search, recognizing they lack the necessary tracking skills. His attempt to question the Wise Ones is rebuffed by Neverin, who offers no comfort, only a cold analysis of the lawless nature of the rogue Isle, who may have taken Fael, and advises him to get drunk if he cannot control his emotions. The chapter concludes as twilight descends. Perrin walks through his own camp, where preparations are being made to move. He speaks briefly with Linny, Fael's chief maid, who confirms that her own cherished charge, Majdin, was also with Fael and is missing. Finding nothing else he can do, Perrin makes his way to a low ridge outside the camp. There, he finds Talanvor, Magdin's beloved, already keeping watch. The two men stand together in the deepening darkness, a silent vigil of shared, desperate hope as snow begins to fall, covering the land and erasing any tracks that might have led them to the women they love. Chapter 3. Customs. Beginning moments after her capture, Fael's primary concern while being forced through the snowy landscape was the life-threatening cold. With only woolen stockings remaining from her attire, one used to bind her elbows and the other as a leash, she was almost completely exposed to the icy winds. Her thoughts briefly touched on her husband, Perrin, hoping he would learn of Masema's treachery and the Shido presence from Berelain, though she also wished for Berelain to suffer a fatal accident afterward. However, her own survival was the more immediate problem. The column of approximately 150 Shido IL moved at a relentless trot that she struggled to maintain. Her captor, a massive man named Roland, treated her with an impersonal detachment, hauling her up by the hair when she fell and delivering a slap to her backside to urge her onward, his manner more like that of a man handling livestock than a man with a naked woman. Fael found this lack of lecherous interest both a relief and, strangely, a minor insult. As hours passed, the struggle to simply stay upright became immense, and the sharp snow crust began to cut her feet, leaving frozen blood in her tracks, while the fear of frostbite consumed her. When the column eventually halted, Roland unceremoniously heaved Fael onto his shoulder like a sack of grain. From this vantage, she surveyed her fellow captives. Queen Aleandra was trembling and exhausted, her modesty forgotten in the face of survival. Fael's maid, Maigdin, appeared similarly haggard, but maintained a more regal composure than the actual queen. The two Aiel maidens, Ban and Chiad were unbound and enduring the ordeal with stoicism, having accepted their fate as Gaishain for a year and a day. The other women from Fael, Lasil and Arella attempted to emulate this Aiel resilience with mixed results. The situation deteriorated when Aleandra and Maigdin violently resisted being carried. They fought wildly, kicking and shouting, with Maigdin even biting one of the Aiel. Fael tried to command them to stop, but Roland silenced her with a sharp slap. The two resisting women were swiftly overpowered, held down in the snow, and methodically whipped with switches until their struggles turned to wordless howling and weeping. Fael felt no sympathy, viewing their defiance as a foolish delay that jeopardized everyone's chances of reaching shelter and surviving the cold. Once the journey resumed with all prisoners being carried, Fael faced a new battle against the encroaching numbness of hypothermia. The lulling motion of being carried threatened to pull her into a fatal sleep. To stay awake, she forced her muscles to work and tried to focus her mind on planning future arguments with Perrin. When that failed, she began to intentionally struggle, provoking Roland into slapping her repeatedly, using the sharp jolt of pain to keep herself conscious. Ultimately, she lost the fight and slipped into a stupor filled with harrowing dreams of losing Perrin and being simultaneously burned and frozen to death. She awoke in daylight to a steady snowfall, wrapped in a blanket and being tended to by a tall, scarred Gaishain with striking green eyes, who was giving her hot, honey-thickened tea. All her companions were alive and receiving similar care, though they looked utterly ravaged by the ordeal. The hope this brought was immediately crushed by a devastating realization. In the distance, a vast flood of Aiel, wagons, and animals was on the move. They had not been captured by a small raiding party, but had been brought to the entire migrating Shido clan. The Gaishain explained that by Aiel customs, wrapping them in blankets was a shaming act, labeling them as weak. He also referred to Roland as Meridin, or brotherless, a term of contempt. Fael's final, desperate attempt to plant seeds of dissent by questioning the Shido's customs was placidly dismissed by the man. Surrounded now by tens of thousands of enemies, she fought despair, her mind, her only weapon, feeling as frozen as her body. Chapter 4. Offers. The chapter commences with Fael and her fellow captives kneeling in the snow, their thoughts of hot tea interrupted by the arrival of 3 women. 2 are formidable Aiel, flanking a shorter woman dressed in the white robes of a Gaishain. Fael's attention is immediately captured by the trio. The Gaishain is an anomaly. Despite the meek posture expected of her station, she wears robes of rich silk and is adorned with an elaborate gold belt and a matching collar, jewelry forbidden to those in her position and of a quality usually reserved for royalty. However, it is the 2 Aiel women who truly command the scene, and Fael correctly identifies them as wise ones by their palpable air of authority. One is a stern, eagle-faced woman named Therava, who stands as tall as most Aiel men. The other, Summarin, is even more extraordinarily tall, towering over even Perrin, with a striking cascade of yellow hair and a remarkable amount of her bosom exposed to the freezing weather, adorned with heavy necklaces of ivory and gold. As the wise ones approach, Therava gestures dismissively to the Shido warriors who captured the prisoners, and they depart, though not without some hesitation from Roland and his companions. Fael, feeling trapped and desperate, analyzes this small moment of defiance as a potential crack in the Shido's unity. Summarin remarks with amusement that they have more Gaishain for Savannah, who she says will not be satisfied until the entire world is enslaved. Therava, however, responds with stony disapproval, stating that they already have too many captives slowing their progress. Her harsh gaze sweeps over the prisoners, and Fael instinctively lowers her head, recognizing Therava as a woman who sees challenges everywhere and is eager to crush them. This moment of caution is shattered by Aleandra, the queen of Gealdan. Despite her predicament, she attempts to rise and, failing that, kneels with regal arrogance, announcing her title and demanding proper treatment and ransom. She asserts that both her liege lady and she will require suitable accommodations, a declaration that reveals her profound misunderstanding of their captors. Her naive attempt at command prompts the arrival of another figure, a woman on horseback who Fael initially assumes is Ael due to her height, but whose attire is a flamboyant contradiction. This woman, Savannah, is dressed in a divided silk skirt, a creamy blouse, and red boots, her hair held back by a brocaded silk kerchief and a circlet of gold. Her neck and arms are laden with pearls, emeralds, and other gems, a stark contrast to the Wise One's more rustic jewelry. She questions the silk-clad Gaishine, whom she calls Galena, about Alyandra's claim to be a queen, and, more intriguingly, to have a liege lady. Galena grovels before Savannah, confirming that Alyandra is indeed the Queen of Gealden and that having a queen swear fealty would make her superior and exceptionally powerful woman. Her fawning is cut short by Tharava, who grips her shoulder tightly and silences her. The power dynamics are stark. Galena fears Tharava intensely, and both Wise Ones, despite their own authority, seem wary of Savannah. Fael observes Savannah with a cold focus, recognizing her as the architect of the destruction in Caerhien and the slaughter at Dumai's Wells, a battle where Perrin nearly died. This personal connection fuels Fael's desire for vengeance. Savannah slowly rides along the line of captives, her gaze falling upon Maegdyn, who identifies herself as the maid, and then upon Fael, who reluctantly admits to being the liege lady. Noting their frostbitten feet, Savannah commands Galena to heal them. Fael is stunned by the word heal, and her suspicion is confirmed when Tharava shoves Galena forward, ordering her to obey. As Galena approaches, Fael sees a great serpent ring on her finger just before the woman seizes her head. The world blurs in a rush of healing, leaving Fael drained and ravenously hungry, but with her feet fully restored. She watches as Galena quickly heals the others, the process leaving each of them momentarily collapsing from the shock and after effects. Galena, a confirmed Aes Sedai in the robes of a slave, then seeks praise from the Wise Ones, who ignore her and walk away, deep in conversation. Following this, more Gaishane arrive, bringing food and white robes. Fael and the others are dressed in the garb of their new station, but are also forced to wear wide, heavy belts and collars of golden chain, marking them as personal servants of Savannah. The click of the collar's latch sounds to Fael like a prison door locking. Now clothed as Gaishine, they join the immense moving column of the Shido. Fael, Alyandra, and Maegdyn begin a fruitless search for Bain, Chiad, and their other companions amidst the swirling snow and the sea of white-robed figures. Fael proposes that if any one of them finds an opportunity to escape, they should take it, promising that her husband will be following them. Alyandra and Maegdyn, however, refuse to abandon her, citing their oaths and loyalty. Their conversation is interrupted by the reappearance of Tharava. The Wise One confronts them, stating with scornful certainty that she knows they are thinking of escape. She warns them that for wetlanders, being Gaishine is a life sentence, not a term of a year and a day, and that she is their only hope of avoiding this fate. She then forces them into her service, commanding them to act as her spies. They are to serve Savannah, but report every word, every whisper, and every conversation to Tharava or her designated Wise One daily. The threat is explicit. If they please her, she will arrange for them to be left behind. But if Savannah discovers their treachery, Tharava herself will see them triced up for cooking. Trapped, Fael has no choice but to agree. Later, as they trudge through the worsening blizzard, they are approached by Galena. The Aes Sedai, no longer fawning, demands to know if they recognize what she is. Alyandra challenges her, stating that no true Aes Sedai would be in such a position. Enraged, Galena delivers a tirade about the brutal reality of serving Savannah, detailing the horrific punishments for attempted escape. The conversation shifts when Galena demands to know who Fael is, that a queen would swear fealty to her. Fael coldly reveals her name is Fael to Aibara. The name electrifies Galena, who immediately makes the connection to Perrin Ibarra and, by extension, to Rand al'Thor. She realizes the immense value Fail represents to Savannah and uses this knowledge as leverage. The Aes Sedai offers them a path to escape, but at a price. She reveals that Tharava possesses a smooth white rod kept in an unlocked red chest in her tent. Galena commands them to steal it for her. If they succeed, she will help them get away. If they refuse or fail, she will reveal Fail's identity to Savannah and leave them to their fate. The chapter concludes with Fail realizing she is caught in 3 interlocking snares, owned by Savannah, forced to spy by Tharava, and blackmailed into theft by Galena. Yet she remains resolved to plan and fight her way out of the trap. Chapter 5. Flags. The chapter opens within the wolf dream, where Perrin, in his wolf persona as Young Bull, is engaged in a frantic and desperate search for his captured wife, Fail. He races across an endless, snow-covered landscape, driven by a singular obsessive need to find her scent. The physical sensations of the world have faded. He is numb to the cold and the pain in his paws, his entire being consumed by the hunt. His thoughts are primal, filled with violent intentions toward those who have taken her. He is joined by Hopper, a grizzled, scarred wolf spirit, who materializes to run alongside him. Hopper urgently communicates that Fail is not in the dream world and that Perrin is lingering too long, his spirit too far from his physical body, a state that will lead to his permanent death. Perrin, however, is too lost in his grief and rage to listen, thinking only of finding the falcon, his name for Fael in this realm. When Hopper physically impedes him, knocking him down to get his attention, Perrin's desperation culminates in an attack on his wolf friend, a testament to how his human reason has been overwhelmed. Hopper, more experienced in this world, easily evades the attack and reinforces his warning, compelling Perrin to return to the waking world where his search must truly begin. Perrin awakens with a jolt, finding himself disoriented and hollowed out by exhaustion and despair. He is in a large, opulent tent, lying naked in an intricately carved and gilded bed. The air is scented with musky perfume and charcoal, and he immediately recognizes the presence of Berylin, the first of Mayenne. Without even lifting his head, his first words are a question about Fail's whereabouts. Berylin explains that his scouts have not returned, but hers were found dead, victims of a non-Aiel ambush. She recounts finding him and his armsmen nearly frozen in the snow, snarling like an animal at anyone who approached. She justifies bringing him to her tent by explaining that her advisor, the Aes Sedai Anora, was needed to heal him from a cold so deep it seemed his very soul was gone. Perrin remains suspicious of her motives, questioning why one of the Ashaman or the other Aes Sedai could not have healed him. Berylin offers plausible but unconvincing excuses. The conversation shifts as Berylin reveals critical intelligence. Masema, the prophet, has arrived not with a small honor guard as agreed, but with an army of several thousand zealots. More alarmingly, she reports that Masema has been meeting secretly with the Shonchan, a fact discovered by Fail's own retainers, who Perrin is shocked to learn are acting as her personal network of spies. While grappling with this revelation about his wife's secret activities, Berylin makes a stunningly forward proposition. In a sudden shift of tone, she offers herself to him, stating that he will be only the third man to share her bed, and that unlike the others who were for political reasons, he will be for pleasure. Just as she finishes her offer, her serving woman, Rosen, enters with a tray of food. The woman's knowing smile makes it clear she overheard the entire exchange, deepening Perrin's humiliation. Disgusted and overwhelmed by Berylin's timing and audacity, Perrin ignores the food, dresses quickly, and stalks out of the tent into the falling snow. Outside, he is further mortified when he approaches Berylin's serving women and thief catchers to ask for the location of Masema's camp. Their poorly concealed giggles and smirks confirm that the gossip about him and Berylin is already spreading. As he walks through the snow away from the organized camps, Perrin reflects on his now shattered plans. The banners of Manetheren which he had intended to use as a deception to travel south unhindered, are now useless. Fael's capture has changed everything. He realizes he must abandon his previous course and make a new, terrible decision, one that will come at a great cost, paid by others, and will undoubtedly haunt him with nightmares. Chapter 6. The Scent of Madness. Searching for Daniel amidst the increasing snowfall, Perrin located him near a fire and found his men creating a space for him, their attitudes a mixture of sympathy and awkwardness. He inquired about the location of Masema's followers, concealing his own profound exhaustion. Daniel sourly reported that they were approximately 3 miles to the south and west, describing them as a flock of unsavory individuals who looked capable of skinning their own mothers. Lem Aldai, another of Perrin's men, spat in disgust, expressing an eagerness for a physical confrontation with them. Perrin quietly warned them that Masema's followers would indeed commit such atrocities if commanded, reminding them of the fate of Beralan's men. He then issued a series of rapid commands, deciding to abandon his delay and begin the pursuit immediately. He ordered Daniel to gather all their men and proceed toward the ambush site, with the intent to use a gateway created by Grady or Neild once they had a clearer direction. He also instructed that the Mainers and Ghealdanin forces be mobilized, with scouts and flankers deployed to avoid any further surprises. Crucially, he asked that the Wise Ones be kept close, fearing that the Ghealdanin commander, Arganda, might try to interrogate them despite his orders, an act that could lead to a disastrous internal conflict. As the camp began to stir with activity, Perrin wrestled with his own internal turmoil, particularly his discomfort with the formal title of Lord Perrin, which he felt was creating an impassable gulf between him and the men from his home. His unease was interrupted by Basil Gill, who informed him that the young soldier Talonvor had departed alone at first light to search for the captured women, a foolish but understandable act of desperation. Gill himself expressed deep affection for Maegdine, one of the captives, and a desire to join the hunt. Perrin then encountered Linny, whose anger was a palpable scent. She berated him for not having eaten, but her words were cryptic, speaking of supping from too many dishes. Puzzled, Perrin pressed Gill for an explanation. The innkeeper reluctantly revealed that Linny had visited the Maina camp before dawn and had been told by one of Beralin's maids that Perrin had spent the night in the first's tent. This rumour, implying infidelity, had spread like wildfire. Perrin was furious, his denial choked with rage, and he suddenly understood the strange behaviour of his men. Their averted glances and discomfort were not just sympathy, but suspicion and judgment. His anger was further stoked by a confrontation with Seland and a dozen of her high-born followers, who haughtily demanded the return of their horses. Dressed in men's clothing and affecting Aiel customs, they radiated a scent of petulant fury. Perrin, exhausted and enraged, initially dismissed them, telling them to walk like the Aiel or ride in the carts. He then lashed out, accusing them of being spies for his wife and speculating that their clandestine activities might have led to Fael's capture. Selander and her companions reacted with outrage, proclaiming they would die for Fael and were bound to her by a water oath. Realizing the need for their cooperation, however misguided, Perrin relented, agreeing to give them their horses on the condition that they obey his orders without question until Fael was rescued. Selander grudgingly accepted these terms, her loyalty to Fael overriding her pride. Just as the column was beginning to move, a shout announced the approach of Aiel. 10 veiled figures were seen trotting through the snow, leading a white horse with a bundle tied to its saddle. Perrin rode out to meet them, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The Aiel were maidens from his own party, led by Sulin, accompanied by 3 warders. Sulin greeted him with what she termed good news, handing him a bundle of dark blue cloth. It was Fael's dress, sliced neatly down the front and along the arms, but carrying her scent and blessedly, no trace of blood. Sulin confirmed that Fael, along with Aliandra, Maegdine, and several others, had been taken alive and made Gaishain. The men who had fought back too fiercely were killed with spears. while the rest died by arrows. Sulin then presented the grim evidence gathered from the site. She separated a pile of ale arrows by clan, revealing that while a few came from various clans who had rejected Rand as the Kara Khan, the overwhelming majority were Shido. This was a shocking revelation, as the Shido clan was believed to be hundreds of leagues away. The party had also discovered a child's rag doll and tracks of numerous carts, suggesting that an entire sept, or perhaps more, was on the move, a force of at least 1,000 spears. Furthermore, they had found evidence of another, separate army of thousands of mounted soldiers, had seen Shonchan flying creatures, and had discovered the tracks of a monstrous six-toed beast. All of these disparate and dangerous forces were moving south. Despite the overwhelming odds, Perrin's resolve was unshakable. He declared they would go south and prepared to have the Ashaman create a gateway to travel 40 miles in that direction to close the distance. Before he could give the order, he was confronted by Masema and 100 of his fanatical followers. Dan'l warned Perrin that these men considered him Shadowspawn due to his golden eyes. Masema, his face a mask of zealotry, demanded to know Perrin's intentions. Taking a great risk, Perrin calmly explained that his wife had been kidnapped by Aiel and that he intended to use the One Power to travel south and rescue her. A wave of fear and revulsion went through Masema's men. However, in a moment of stunning cognitive dissonance, Masema declared that the Dragon Reborn would be grieved if harm came to fail. Therefore, he was granting a special dispensation, for this single instance only, for Perrin to use the power. The madman's eyes burned with an unholy fire even as he spoke the words, and Perrin was struck by the terrifying thought that Fael might be safer with the Shido than he was in the company of such a volatile and insane ally. Chapter 7. The Streets of Caemlyn. Elaine's procession made its way through the hilly, crowded thoroughfares of Caemlyn, drawing significant notice from the city's inhabitants. She consciously rode with her hood down, ensuring the golden lily emblem on her cloak and the golden rose on her daughter heir coronet were plainly visible. Her intent was to be seen not merely as the head of House Trakand, but as the future queen, a public assertion of her claim. The morning was cold enough to frost her breath, yet the cleared streets were bustling with life, the city's population swollen far beyond its normal capacity. The crowds moved slowly, a mix of merchants, cart drivers, and a few street peddlers braving the chill. The public reaction to her presence was mixed. Most people stared, some pointed her out, and occasionally small groups would shout support for Trakand or for Elaine and Andor. The relative quiet, however, was unnerving. She understood that silence was better than jeers, especially from the famously outspoken citizens of Caemlyn, but the lack of widespread cheering felt like a lonely void. She reflected on the adage that holding Caemlyn was the key to holding Andor, and knew that while she occupied the city's stone structures, she had not yet captured the hearts of its people, a far more critical task. Riding with her were Saratha and Aes Sedai, whose face had not yet acquired the ageless look, and her warder, Ned Yarman, whose shimmering cloak made him a conspicuous, ghostly figure. The primary escort, however, consisted of 8 women serving in the Queen's Guard, a novelty Elaine had established herself. These women were a varied group, led by a former merchant's guard named Kasey Raskovny, and including a former tavern keeper, Denny Colford, alongside several former hunters for the Horn, all of whom had been vetted by Begita. During the ride, Saritha voiced her concern about the dangers of the crowded streets, pointing out the presence of 10 Aes Sedai staying at the Silver Swan Inn. She suggested they could be agents of Elada, but Elaine, while privately worried, remained outwardly calm. Elaine mused on the puzzle of why Elada had been so determined to have her return to the tower long before she was a serious contender for the throne. Saritha also warned of the more conventional threat of kidnapping by rival houses, but Elaine insisted that she must be seen among the people, unafraid, to earn their loyalty. As they rode, Elaine observed the state of the city herself, wanting a perspective beyond the dry reports of her first clerk. The crowds were filled with foreigners and refugees, the latter appearing haggard and defeated. She attempted to give a coin to a desperate-looking mother with a child, but the woman was too lost in her misery to even notice, a poignant symbol of a problem Elaine felt powerless to solve. In contrast, she also saw signs of economic renewal, with new manufactories for glass and lace springing up, a product of refugees with valuable skills finding new opportunities. This offered a glimmer of hope for future tax revenues. Her attention was also drawn to the large number of mercenaries in the city, a ready source of soldiers but also a political risk, as relying on foreigners to secure her throne could alienate Andorrans. Her ride was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of Birgitta, whose anger Elaine could feel through their bond even before she appeared. Birgitta galloped through the crowd to deliver terrible news. The small escort sent to bring Elaine's rivals, Nayan and Elenia, to Camelin had been ambushed and killed. The two women were now missing. The immediate implication, which Elaine voiced aloud to her later regret, was that there was a spy within the royal palace. Birgitta confirmed that she had already informed the first maid, who was beginning a rigorous investigation of the staff. Saratha used the incident to again propose a personal bodyguard for Elaine, a suggestion she furiously rejected. Consumed with guilt, Elaine blamed herself for the men's deaths, believing she should have sent a larger force. Birgitta sharply rebuked this notion, arguing that a larger escort would only have drawn more attention, and that Elaine's adventuring days were over. She was a queen and could not handle everything herself. The argument then turned personal, as Birgitta alluded to Elaine sneaking out of the palace at night in disguise. Saratha chimed in, revealing that she was also aware of this escapade and describing the dangers in a way that made it clear she was speaking of a specific, recent event, leaving Elaine embarrassed and angry. After this tense exchange, Elaine provided a cold, precise analysis of the political ramifications of the kidnapping. She explained that if House Sarand held the women, they would likely consolidate 4 houses against her, whereas if House Aron held them, the resulting infighting would be to her advantage. The ride back to the palace was completed in silence, with Elaine brooding over spies, her missing rivals, and her dwindling finances. Upon returning to the stableyard, she was met with an atmosphere of tension and surprise. Her paranoia grew as she found herself scrutinizing every servant, wondering who might be an informant. This suspicion followed her inside, where she had a final, heated confrontation with Birgitta. When Elaine criticized her Captain General's coarse language, Birgitta retorted sharply, promising a long talk later and ending with a formal, almost mocking bow. Left alone and frustrated, Elaine summoned a young servant boy to fetch the first maid. She correctly guessed the boy had been slacking, but her fleeting amusement turned to unease as she realized he was not much younger than herself, and, in this new climate of distrust, could just as easily be a spy as an idle youth. Chapter 9. A Cup of Tea. The chapter begins with Elaine Trakand in her dressing room, hastily changing out of her riding attire with the assistance of her quiet and elderly maid, Esanda. Elaine chooses a fine blue wool dress, adorned with seed pearls, intended to impress the merchants she is scheduled to meet later. Her thoughts are occupied with a multitude of pressures, including the need to project an image of power and wealth despite her precarious financial situation, which has already led to the pawning of most of her jewellery. She also senses the simmering irritation of her Captain General Birgitta Silverbow, through their unique bond, speculating that Birgitta is finding the administrative reports taxing. Once dressed, Elaine enters her sitting room to find Halwyn Norrie, her first clerk, waiting for her. The tall, heron-like man brings what he describes as matters of importance. The first piece of news is monumentally positive. A large deposit of first-quality alum has been discovered on Elaine's estates. This is a massive financial boon, as high-grade alum is a rare and valuable commodity essential for dyeing, glassmaking, and other trades. The discovery effectively solves Elaine's pressing money problems, ensuring she can secure loans to fund her growing army of guards and her planned institution, the Academy of the Rose, which she intends to dedicate to her mother's memory. Norrie then transitions to more alarming international news gathered from his correspondence. He reveals that the White Tower in Tar Valon, under the authority of Elida, has issued a stunning proclamation. It officially acknowledges Rand al'Thor as the Dragon Reborn, but frames it as an offer of the Tower's protection and guidance, while also forbidding anyone from approaching him except through them. Elaine is aghast at the proclamation's arrogance, correctly assessing it as a tactic guaranteed to infuriate Rand rather than win his cooperation. The news grows darker as Norrie reports that, according to a source in Cairhien, the Sun Palace was attacked with the One Power, and Rand himself has vanished. While some believe him dead, the prevailing rumour is that he has gone to Tar Valon to submit to Elida. Elaine internally dismisses both possibilities, certain that Rand is neither dead nor foolish enough to kneel to Elida. She worries intensely about who attacked him, but forces herself to set the issue aside, knowing she must focus on securing her own throne in Andor. Norrie continues with a roundup of other geopolitical events, noting the strange absence of several borderland rulers from their capitals and the build-up of forces in Mirandi under its king, Rodran. Elaine, using intelligence she secretly received from Egwene, impresses Norrie by demonstrating a deep understanding of Rodran's complex political machinations to consolidate power. She then expertly handles another delicate issue Norrie raises, an offer of military support from Cairhienan nobles. Recognizing that the presence of Cairhienan soldiers on Andoran soil would be a political disaster, she dictates a masterful and diplomatic letter to Norrie, declining the aid while firmly asserting her own claim to the Sun Throne. Her display of shrewd statecraft leaves her wondering if she has finally secured the cautious First Clerk's full allegiance. Later, as Elaine sits down for her customary light midday meal of broth and tea, Lady Dylan Taravin bursts in with urgent news of a massive army of Borderlanders gathering in the nearby Brame Wood, a development Elaine immediately suspects is connected to Rand. As they discuss this, Elaine suddenly feels an unnatural exhaustion. Staring at her teacup, she realizes with a wave of horror that she has been drugged with forkroot, a substance that severs a channeler's connection to the One Power. She barely manages to gasp out a warning to Dylan that she has been poisoned. At that moment, 3 men disguised as liveried servants enter the room, drawing long knives. Dylan reacts with incredible bravery, screaming for the guards and hurling a chair at the assassins to buy time. However, a slender blue-eyed killer engages her, and despite her fierce resistance, he fatally stabs her. The assassin then turns his attention to the helpless and incapacitated Elaine. Just as he advances, he is shockingly impaled from behind by a sword blade that erupts from his chest. Elaine's drugged mind vaguely registers a scene of chaos. Another assassin lies dead with a broken neck, while the third is locked in a desperate struggle with a guardsman. As darkness consumes her, Elaine's last conscious thought is a frantic, silent plea for Birgitte to hurry. Chapter 10. A Plan Succeeds. The chapter commences with Elaine regaining consciousness in the enveloping darkness of her bedchamber, her senses slowly reorienting to her surroundings. She feels a chill on her face, while the rest of her body is overwarm and constricted by blankets and hot water bottles. A brief surge of panic gives way to a sense of security as she becomes aware of Avienda's steady presence in the room and feels Birgitte's controlled anger through their warder bond. Her greatest fear during the ordeal had not been death, but the permanent loss of her ability to channel, and she feels a profound sense of relief as she instinctively reaches for the true source, touching the periphery of Sadar without actually drawing it in. Her memory of the attack returns, and she sits up, concerned for Dylan and the guardsmen involved. Nynaeve emerges from the shadows to reassure her, explaining that the man was unharmed and that she had healed Dylan, who had suffered significant blood loss. Nynaeve mentions that Elaine had been close to developing a fever and that she had administered herbs rather than using the One Power, a decision that draws a sour comment from Birgitte. Avienda, however, defends Nynaeve's caution, pointing out that she correctly identified the forkroot in Elaine's tea and wisely chose not to use weaves she was unfamiliar with, a defense that seems to irritate Nynaeve, who is sensitive about her healing abilities being surpassed by some of the kin. The conversation shifts to the details of the assault. Elaine, feeling wobbly but clear-headed, channels to light the lamps, prompting a minor scolding from Nynaeve about needing rest. Elaine expresses a sense of obligation, or to, toward Dyelin for having doubted her loyalty, a sentiment Avienda gently tempers by explaining the nuances of Aiel custom. The true nature of the attack is then laid bare when Birgitte carefully unwraps a poisoned dagger, one of 4 identical weapons carried by the assailants. She recounts how a man named Doylin Meller, a lieutenant in the guard, happened upon the scene and heroically intervened, killing all 3 attackers, one with a dramatic sword throw worthy of a gleeman's tale. Nynaeve confirms the poison on the blade is a lethal mixture of grey fennel and powdered peach pit, noting that it was the poison, not the knife wound, that killed the final man. They analyse the assassin's strategy, using forkroot to render Elaine helpless before murdering her with the poisoned blade. In response to the clear and present danger, Elaine immediately agrees to a personal bodyguard. Birgitte, ever prepared, has already formulated a plan for a discreet force of approximately 20 women. However, Elaine makes a startling decision that shocks her friends. Instead of promoting a trusted guardswoman, she names the rescuer, Doylin Meller, as the captain of this new bodyguard. Nynaeve questions her sanity, but Elaine explains her reasoning. She feels safer with him close, and his known reputation as a womanizer will ensure the 20 female guards under his command watch him with extreme vigilance. She decrees that Meller's heroism should be publicized throughout the city to enhance his heroic persona, though the detail of the poison is to be kept secret. Nynaeve offers a chillingly prescient warning, suggesting that Elaine's cleverness might one day be her undoing. As the palace gong signals a late hour, Elaine insists on joining her scheduled meeting with Egwene in Teleran Rayod, the world of dreams. Nynaeve attempts to forbid it, citing Elaine's weakened state, but Elaine cleverly circumvents her by calling Nynaeve's bluff regarding a cup of wine on the bedside table, correctly guessing it contains a sleeping draught. This leads to a brief but intense argument between Birgitte and Avienda over a warder's proper conduct, which Nynaeve surprisingly quells with a firm command, demonstrating her growing authority. Elaine drinks the drugged wine and drifts into sleep, leaving Birgitte and Avienda to stand guard. Elaine finds herself in the reflection of the grand hall within Teleranriod. After a brief, amusing encounter with the dream of a scullion sitting on the lion throne, Elaine speaks aloud to the images of Andor's past queens in the windows, vowing to prove herself worthy. She is joined by Nynaeve, who struggles to maintain a consistent imagined appearance, and then by a fully composed Egwene. Elaine provides a succinct summary of the day's harrowing events. Egwene listens, primarily concerned by the continued mystery of the Black Arja sister in the palace. The discussion then turns to the political difficulties Egwene faces with the Hall of the Tower, particularly their resistance to integrating the kin. This leads to a stark disagreement over the oath rod. Elaine and Nynaeve argue passionately against swearing the 3 oaths, presenting evidence from the kin that doing so drastically shortens a channeler's lifespan. Egwene, however, is resolute, viewing the oaths as the fundamental definition of an Aes Sedai. She reveals her long-term plan, to allow sisters to retire from the tower by having their oaths removed, after which they would join the kin, thus binding the kin to the tower's authority. The meeting is abruptly interrupted by the appearance of 2 spies. First, a tall, red-haired man with a harsh face resembling Rand's is spotted watching them. He flees when noticed. Immediately after, a door clicks shut at the opposite end of the vast hall, indicating a second unseen eavesdropper. Egwene deduces they are not working together. The mention of the first spy's Sheenaran coat reminds Elaine of Dylin's news about an army of Borderlanders camped in Brem Wood. As she shares this information, a brilliant idea forms in her mind. She declares with newfound confidence that she can use the presence of these foreign rulers to finally secure her claim to the Lion Throne. The perspective then shifts to 2 separate groups of antagonists. In one location, 3 Black Ager sisters, Asen, Chesmal, and Eldrith, are joined by a fourth, Timael. Timael, who frightens the others with her cruelty, reveals she has just returned from Tel Aranariod, where she spied on Elaine, Nynaeve, and Egwene. She confirms their presence in the royal palace and insists they must act to capture them to regain favour with the Forsaken. Elsewhere, a woman now calling herself Lady Shiaine, who is secretly the dark friend Millie Scarnin, lords her authority over 2 other captured Black Ager sisters, Phalion and Marilyn, who are being punished by the Forsaken Moradin. Shiaine is orchestrating a plot against Elaine, and Marilyn reveals there is another Black Ager sister already inside the palace who can be of assistance. The chapter concludes with the arrival of Dave Hanlon, who triumphantly announces his success. It is revealed that Hanlon is none other than Doylin Mellor, confirming that his heroic rescue of Elaine was a carefully staged event, and that the would-be Queen of Andor has just appointed her own assassin as the captain of her personal guard. Chapter 11. Ideas of Importance. The narrative opens with Rand al'Thor stepping through a gateway into a dark and dusty storeroom on the highest floor of the royal palace in Camlin. The act of channeling leaves him profoundly ill. The taint on Saidan creates a wave of nausea and vertigo that he struggles to suppress. Within the recesses of his mind, the voice of his past incarnation, Luz Therin Telemann, hysterically bemoans their proximity to what he perceives as the Pit of Doom, a manifestation of the madness that constantly plagues Rand. Ignoring the inner voice for the moment, Rand beckons Min Farshaw through the portal before hastily closing it, the release of the One Power, providing immediate, blessed relief from the sickness, though the feeling of filth from the taint remains. Rand observes Min, who is dressed in a striking blue coat and snug breeches, a fashionable and practical outfit that he fears will draw unwanted attention. His plan for this visit is one of absolute stealth, intended for only a select few to ever know of his presence. Min, however, argues that her recognizable appearance is essential for their plan to work, as Rand himself is concealed by a mask of mirrors. This magical disguise presents him to the world as a shorter, older man with lank hair and a prominent wart, a commoner named Nuli, who would never gain entry to the palace unescorted. This illusion is woven with inverted threads of the power, making it undetectable even to other male channelers. Rand's immediate and urgent goal is to locate Nynaeve and Mat Cawthon and depart as swiftly as possible, a goal motivated by a deep-seated fear of confronting Elaine Trakand and Avienda. He is in love with all 3 women, a complex emotional entanglement he feels too weak to face, convinced that Elaine and Avienda must surely hate him despite Min's assurances to the contrary. As they venture from the storeroom into a corridor, their secrecy is immediately compromised by an encounter with Reen Harfer, the palace's first maid. Min, thinking on her feet, seizes the opportunity. She greets the woman warmly and concocts a story that the disguised Rand is a deliveryman named Nuli, with an urgent package for Nynaeve. Mistress Harfor, though suspicious of Rand's appearance, is more concerned with protocol. She informs them that Nynaeve is now referred to as Nynaeve Sedai, a title that shocks Rand, and furthermore, that she has no knowledge of anyone named Mat Cawthon being in the palace. This absence of Mat triggers a disorienting flash of colour in Rand's mind, a near vision that makes him stumble. Min, in a calculated move that infuriates Rand, then claims to have another errand and instructs Mistress Harfor to escort Nuli to Nynaeve's quarters before darting away. Rand understands her intent with cold certainty. She is going to find Elaine, threatening to derail his entire clandestine operation. Forced into the role of a subservient workman, Rand follows the stern first maid through the palace corridors. He observes a surprising number of women who are clearly channeling Saidar, their presence prickling his senses, yet none possess the ageless look of a true Aes Sedai. He deduces that these must be other groups of channelers, and Mistress Harfor confirms his fears by stating there are only 5 Aes Sedai in residence. including Elaine and Nynaeve. This revelation is a bitter disappointment for Rand, who had clung to rumors of hundreds of sisters flocking to Caemlyn, a force he had hoped to rally. His original, more modest hope for a few dozen has proven wildly optimistic, and he is left feeling isolated and his plans more precarious. The perspective then shifts to Nynaeve Almiara, who is enduring a tedious and humiliating channeling lesson with the Sea Folk. She is instructing an apprentice named Talarn under the watchful eyes of Zaida, a non-channeling wave mistress, and a contingent of windfinders. The power dynamic is inverted and deeply frustrating for Nynaeve. She is the teacher, yet the Sea Folk treat her with condescension, dictating the terms of her instruction and scrutinizing her every move. Her vexation is compounded by the fact that her fellow Aes Sedai have avoided this duty, leaving her to face the demanding Atha'an Mier alone. During the practice session, Talarn, a surprisingly deft and powerful channeler, manages to shield Nynaeve. Rather than ending the lesson, Zaida sees this as an opportunity for an experiment. She orders the other Windfinders to link their power and commands Talarn to maintain the shield on Nynaeve. Zaida's intent is to test Nynaeve's assertion that a shield cannot be broken by someone of equal or lesser strength. To add pressure, she threatens to have Nynaeve turned upside down, a punishment that triggers a deep, traumatic fear in Nynaeve. In a state of rising panic, Nynaeve frantically struggles against the shield, desperately seeking a weak point. She finds a slight softness in the weave, but is repeatedly repelled, her efforts futile. Zaida, seeing the genuine terror and exertion, finally calls off the test, and a contemptuous Windfinder reluctantly confirms that Nynaeve's struggle was not a performance. Released but feeling utterly degraded, Nynaeve is summarily dismissed and ordered to return the next day. Her ordeal continues in the hallway. She is first confronted by Olivia, the immensely powerful former Shonchan domain, who now carries herself with a chilling confidence and speaks casually of killing Suldam. Olivia delivers a summons from the leaders of the kin's knitting circle, which Nynaeve knows will be another session of thinly veiled criticism. Immediately after, she is accosted by a frantic Talarn, who begs Nynaeve to take her to the White Tower. Talarn reveals that her life among the Sea Folk is a nightmare of constant punishment, a perverse consequence of her high-ranking family's efforts to avoid any appearance of favoritism. Before Nynaeve can properly refuse, Talarn misinterprets her hesitation as acceptance and flees, leaving Nynaeve with yet another looming disaster. Lan Mandragoran finds Nynaeve in this state of distress and leads her back to their quarters. They enter to find Mistress Harfor waiting with the disguised Rand. Rand drops the mask of mirrors, revealing his true self. A tense, coded exchange follows between him and Lan, two warriors silently assessing each other and discussing Nynaeve's safety. Nynaeve, in turn, stuns Rand with the news that Egwene Alver is the Amerlin seat of the rebel Aes Sedai in Saladar, commanding an army of 300 sisters. Overwhelmed by his weary and wounded appearance, Nynaeve embraces the source and performs a delving. She is horrified by what she finds. Not just the old, unhealable wound from Falmer, but a new one atop it, both festering with a palpable, distinct evil and shielded from the one power by what feels like a ward of Saidin. Rand then reveals the true purpose of his visit. He unveils two small statues, powerful Ter'angreal, that act as keys to the most powerful male and female Sa'angreal ever created. He explains his monumental plan: to use these incredible artifacts, with Nynaeve's help, to cleanse the male half of the source of the Dark One's taint. Lan immediately objects, recognizing the immense, potentially lethal danger to Nynaeve. Rand acknowledges the risk, but insists it must be tried. Nynaeve, however, refuses to be a passive participant summoned at his convenience. In a final, decisive act, she seizes control of the situation, declaring that she finds the idea wonderful, but will only agree to help if they all undertake the quest together, effective immediately. Chapter 12. A Lily in Winter. The chapter commences with Elaine Trackand making her way through a corridor in the royal palace, accompanied by Min Farshaw and Avienda. She attempts to project an image of stately serenity befitting the daughter heir of Andor, but internally, she is filled with a frantic urgency, wanting to run to her destination. Her agitation is directed at Rand al'Thor, whose tendency to make decisions for everyone else has her on edge. She fears that if he manages to leave again, she will lose her opportunity. Elaine firmly instructs her companions that Rand is to hear nothing of the spies she has sent out, nor of the use of Forkroot, as she worries such information would provoke him into a misguided attempt to rescue her. This, she reflects, could lead to him moving his considerable forces of Ale and Saldaeans back into Caemlyn, an action she would be powerless to prevent short of initiating a war. The dynamic between her two companions is a source of considerable worry for Elaine. Min, dressed in snug breeches and a short coat that Elaine finds scandalous yet practical, asserts that she only withholds information from Rand when it is absolutely necessary. This statement draws a suspicious glare from Avienda, who views it as a form of dishonesty. The two women have maintained a tense and competitive relationship since meeting, circling each other like wary cats. Although they have agreed to a shared course of action regarding Rand, their underlying rivalry is palpable, previously manifesting in a casual but skillful display of their respective knives. Elaine hopes desperately that they can learn to like one another, as their shared future depends on it. Their progression through the palace causes a stir among the serving staff, who stumble and gawk, not at Elaine or her companions, but at the two bodyguards following them, Cassie and Denis. These women are part of Elaine's newly formed all-female bodyguard, a concept so novel in Andor that it alone draws stares. Their appearance has been meticulously crafted by Birgitte Silverbow to be ceremonial and impressive. They wear striking crimson coats, scarlet breeches, and bright red hats adorned with long white plumes. The uniforms are lavishly detailed with lace and will soon be supplemented with custom-fitted breastplates, a detail that Elaine notes must have astonished the palace armourer. Elaine reflects on Birgitte's dedication and her own recent discovery of how to mask their warder bond, a technique she learned by inquiring about how Aes Sedai maintain their privacy. This new knowledge is key to her immediate plans, as she needs to prevent Birgitte from sensing what is about to occur. Upon reaching Nynaeve's chambers, Elaine's apprehension peaks. The man she loves is just beyond the door, and the reality of the impending confrontation makes her almost fearful. She stations her guards outside, commanding them to admit no one, then takes a deep breath and enters with Min and Avienda. Inside, they find Nynaeve and Lan, and more importantly, Rand. At the sight of Elaine, he lurches to his feet, but is immediately overcome by a wave of sickness, staggering and dry-heaving against a table. Nynaeve moves to heal him with the one power, but he waves her away, stating that his ailment is beyond her abilities, and that it is past time for him to leave. Elaine is outraged by his intention to depart without even speaking to them. Rand tries to deflect, citing the danger his presence brings and warning them about treacherous Ashaman. He then begins to ramble, making offhand comments about Taim's supposed mistake in delivering the captured Suldam and Damain, about Egwene's surprising rise to Amirlin of the rebel Aes Sedai, and Mat's command of the Band of the Red Hand. Elaine recognizes this as a desperate attempt to create a diversion. She cuts through his babbling, insisting that the only thing that matters is the relationship between the four of them, and declares that he is not leaving until it is settled. Cornered, Rand makes a stark and shocking confession. He states plainly that he loves all three of them, Elaine, Avienda, and Min, equally without a whisker of difference, and that he wants all three of them. He calls himself a lecher and tells them they can now walk away from the madness of his life. Nynaeve is scandalized, but before she can fully erupt, Elaine calmly responds that she loves him too and wishes to marry him. Avienda echoes the sentiment in the Aiel fashion, offering to make him a bridal wreath, while Min declares that her love for him should be obvious, and that the three of them will work out the details of marriage amongst themselves. Seeing his arguments have failed, Rand agrees to continue the discussion in Elaine's private apartments. To avoid recognition, he uses the One Power to weave a disguise, transforming himself into a coarse, brutish, and physically repulsive man. The guardswomen outside Elaine's rooms are visibly displeased and suspicious of this ugly stranger, and Elaine must assert her authority to get them to stand down. Once inside, Rand drops the illusion and pours himself a cup of wine, his back turned to them. He reveals he saw through Elaine's pretense of not wanting Nynaeve to hear their conversation. At this, Elaine reveals their true purpose. All three women wish to bond him as their warder. Rand is aghast, pointing out that Alana Mosvani has already bonded him against his will months prior. This news enrages the women, who view Alana's act as a profound violation and vow to make her pay. Elaine explains, however, that one bond does not preclude another. The tradition of a man having only one Aes Sedai is based on custom and jealousy, not on any inherent limitation of the power. After a moment of heavy silence, Rand acquiesces, warning them to consider the terrible price they will pay by linking their lives to his. They are resolute, having already accepted the consequences. Elaine then orchestrates a complex and unique bonding. She links with Aviendha, then weaves intricate webs of spirit to connect herself, Aviendha, and Min, creating a shared metaphysical state based on principles from an Aiel adoption ceremony. This creates a linkage where what is felt by one is felt by all. From this unified weave, she extends a single thread of the warder bond and settles it upon Rand. The effect is instantaneous. The women are flooded with his experiences. Min feels the chronic, agonizing pain from his old wounds. Aviendha senses the powerful, glowing veins of gold that represent his love for them. And Elaine feels the truth of that love, cutting through the hardened, stoic knot of his emotions. With the bonding complete, Elaine asks Min and Aviendha to leave them alone. She then masks her bond with Birgitte and, her butterflies returning, tells Rand that he must help her with the buttons on her dress. In the corridor, Min and Aviendha awkwardly begin to get to know one another, a process complicated by the sudden, overwhelming influx of sensations from the bond as Elaine and Rand consummate their relationship. The raw intensity of his passion startles Min, who finds the experience akin to spying. While trying to distract herself, she babbles a viewing to Aviendha. Elaine will become pregnant with twins. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of a furious and unsteady Birgitte. Having felt the emotional and physical bleed-through from Elaine, she is enraged by the violation of her mind and threatens to physically punish both Elaine and Aviendha. In the midst of her tirade, she suddenly senses the truth of Elaine's condition, whimpering, 2 months. Min recognizes the legendary hero, and a tense standoff ensues. Aviendha, desperate to prevent Birgitte from shaming Elaine by bursting in on her, pleads and even offers to pledge herself as Birgitte's apprentice. Finally, she placates the Captain General by offering her Oosquai, a potent Aiel liquor. Birgitte, amused by the idea of a joke being played on her, agrees, and the three women depart to get thoroughly drunk. The next morning, Elaine awakens to find Rand gone. On the pillow beside her lies a perfect golden lily, impossibly fresh in the dead of winter. She weaves a ward of preservation around it as a permanent reminder of him. Her contentment is soon shattered, however, by troubling news. Olivia, the powerful former domain, has disappeared. More disturbingly, Nynaeve and Lan have also vanished from the palace, taking with them the most powerful Angreal from their collection and leaving behind a cryptic, worrying note. Chapter 13. Wonderful News. The chapter begins in the sunroom of the Sun Palace, a space Cadsuane has chosen for audiences to avoid the political statement of using the throne room. Despite fires and glass letting in sunlight, the room feels cold, a reflection of the tense atmosphere. Cadsuane is contending with Hareen Din Tagara, a wave mistress of the sea folk, who is rigidly demanding the immediate return of her windfinder, Shaylin. Cadswain's internal thoughts reveal her deep exasperation, which is directed less at the demanding sea folk and more at her larger, more critical problems. She is acutely aware that she cannot afford any mistakes in her handling of the Dragon Reborn. While she outwardly maintains a smooth and patient facade, she is inwardly preoccupied with studying a group of 5 Aes Sedai, Nessun, Sarene, Erian, Beldain, and Elza, who have mysteriously sworn fealty to Rand al'Thor. She finds their individual justifications, ranging from logical necessity to zealous devotion, to be disturbingly insufficient, and suspects a deeper, unrevealed motive for their unprecedented oaths. The confrontation with Hareen escalates when the Wave Mistress, infuriated at being ignored, sharply taps Cadsuane's cheek. Rather than reacting with immediate anger, Cadsuane demonstrates her formidable control by calmly reciting Hareen's demands back to her, only to then dismantle them with cold, unwavering authority. She dismisses the Sea Folk's title for Rand, the Coromor, as irrelevant, and delivers a chilling threat, promising severe physical punishment if Hareen ever touches her again. She then commands Sarene to escort the 2 Sea Folk women to their rooms for a period of forced fasting and meditation on civility, adding the darkly humorous and paradoxical instruction to spank them if they are rude, but to do so diplomatically. The sailmistress, Dera, wisely persuades a scowling Hareen to comply, recognizing the danger of defying Cadsuane. This entire interaction serves to establish Cadsuane's absolute dominance, and her view of the Sea Folk as a mere irritation and a potential tool, one that needs to be properly shaped for her ultimate purpose. Following this, Sorilea, the Aiel Wise One, approaches with more troubling news. 4 Red Ajah sisters, the last of the group who kidnapped Rand, have also asked to swear fealty to him. This development is deeply perplexing to Cadsuane, as the Red Ajah is fundamentally opposed to men who can channel. Sorilea explains that the sisters are attempting to meet an impossible tioch, or honor debt, and that the Wise Ones will teach them. At the same time, Verin Mathwin reveals the mundane secret behind the suspicious meetings of the Windfinder Shalon and the noblewoman Ailil. They were not plotting treason, but were hiding a romantic relationship, a fact they were desperate to conceal due to the prudish natures of their respective societies. Seeing an opportunity, Cadsuane decides to leverage this secret, planning to blackmail both women into becoming her informants, further demonstrating her ruthless pragmatism. The chapter's title is then revealed as Corale, a yellow sister, arrives with what she hesitantly calls wonderful news. Dama Flynn, one of the Ashaman, has successfully used the One Power to heal a stilled Aes Sedai Ergain. This is a monumental discovery, a cure for what was thought to be incurable. Cadsuane internally acknowledges its world-shaking significance, but dismisses it as a storm in a teacup compared to the challenge of managing Rand al'Thor. Her focus is immediately shattered by a new crisis when Jahar, another Ashaman, runs in to report that Alana Mosvani has suddenly collapsed unconscious. On the way to Alana, Cadsuane is intercepted by Lord Debrain, who confesses to having arranged the escape of Caroline Damodred and Darlin Cisnera, another blow to Cadsuane's control. Upon reaching Alana, they find her unresponsive, and even healing proves ineffective. Cadsuane feels a profound thrill of terror, as Alana's unwanted warder bond is her only reliable means of tracking Rand, and with Alana in this state, that connection is lost. The perspective then shifts dramatically to a secret meeting of the Forsaken. Demandred is enraged that Rand, whom he calls al'Thor, remains free after the failed attack in Carrion. The scene is filled with tension and internal rivalries, particularly when Grandal cunningly introduces the idea that if Rand succeeds in cleansing Saidin, the male Forsaken will no longer need the Dark One's protection from the taint, which could cause the Great Lord to question their loyalty. Their fraught discussion is interrupted by the arrival of Moradin, now established as Nyablis, accompanied by the mysterious Sindain. Moradin exudes an aura of chilling authority and madness, casually demonstrating his mastery of the true power by incinerating a rat. He then directs Sindain to reveal Rand's plan. He possesses the access keys to the colossal Saangriel, known as the Chudan Kal, and intends to use them to cleanse the male half of the One Power. This revelation sends waves of panic and terror through the assembled Forsaken, who understand the apocalyptic power of the Chuidan Kal. They fear Rand could destroy the world simply by attempting to wield them. Grandal's reaction is particularly theatrical, leading Demandred to suspect she already knew of the plan. Moradin, however, remains calm, stating that finding Rand is no longer an issue. He commands them that when Rand touches the Chuidan Kal, his location will become known to them all, and they are to converge on him to either capture him, or if necessary, kill him. The chapter concludes with Demandred's internal thoughts. While he must verbally accept the command of the Nae'Blis, he is privately satisfied that killing his ancient rival is finally an approved option, and begins to contemplate how he might arrange for Moradin's own permanent demise. Chapter 14. What a Veil Hides. Aboard the flagship, the Victory of Kidron, Tuon sits for her morning ritual as her attendant and confidant, Seleucia, carefully shaves her head. Surrounded by the vast fleet of the Return, Tuon contemplates an omen of a black albatross while feeling a profound disturbance to her inner balance. She feels she has lost honor, or become Samosief, because she issued a command in a fit of anger the previous night, a transgression that she believes bodes ill for her entire mission. After Seleucia finishes, Tuon reflects on her own physical appearance in a mirror, contrasting her small stature and childlike face with Seleucia's commanding, stately beauty, acknowledging that she has always had to rely on her intellect rather than her presence to impress others. This leads to a fond recollection of her deep relationship with Seleucia, who was given to her as a cradle gift and served as her nursemaid and secret bodyguard. Tuon recalls her 16th naming day, when Seleucia astonished everyone by turning down powerful appointments to instead ask to become Tuon's chief maid, a testament to a loyalty far greater than any Tuon has known from her own blood relatives, several of whom have actively tried to kill her. Seeking to restore her personal balance, Tuon makes a significant decision. She rejects her typical golden lace cap, which displays her rank, and instead asks Seleucia for a simple sheer veil. While the veil does not hide her face, it conceals her shaven scalp, the mark of her high station, effectively lowering her status in the eyes of others. This is a self-imposed penance. Immediately after, she seeks out the domain she had punished in her anger, a woman named Lydia. Tuon shows her kindness, personally wiping her tears and ordering that her welts be treated and that she be given sweets, a clear act of atonement. She then speaks with her other domain, showing a personal care that underscores her belief that owning them is a significant responsibility. On deck, the nobility of the blood react to her veil by offering lesser bows, acknowledging her chosen temporary reduction in status. Here she is confronted by Anath, her Soepheia, or truth speaker. Anath launches into a loud and contemptuous tirade, calling Tuon a fool and her veil an idiotic farce. Tuon endures the verbal assault, understanding that a truth speaker is required to deliver harsh truths without fear of reprisal. When Anath's harangue ends, Tuon calmly refuses a formal penance, her resolve strengthened by an omen of 3 porpoises. She then shifts the topic to matters of state, asserting her authority by discussing the need to investigate the ambitious High Lady Suroth and, most critically, to find the dragon reborn and force him to kneel before the crystal throne before Tarmon Gaidon. As the ship approaches the harbour of Abu Dar, Tuon feels a renewed sense of purpose, reaffirming her identity as the daughter of the 9 moons, come to reclaim what belongs to her ancestors. Chapter 15. In Need of a Bell Founder. The chapter begins with Mac Cawthon seated uncomfortably on a 3-legged stool inside a wagon that functions as a mobile workshop, reminiscent of a tinker's wagon but filled with workbenches and cabinets instead of living quarters. The air is thick with strange, acrid smells, and Matt is still nursing the lingering pains from his recently healed injuries, which he hopes might elicit some sympathy from his companion, a woman named Aludra. He is trying to persuade her to share her knowledge of fireworks, attempting a charming approach by suggesting that her craft is obsolete in the face of the magical skylights created by Shonchan Domain. Aludra, a Tarrabona woman with long dark hair, is busy grinding a coarse black powder in a large mortar and dismissively replies that she has never witnessed these skylights herself. She firmly states that she will not divulge the secrets of the Illuminators Guild. Matt presses his case, reminding her that she is no longer a member of the guild, carefully rephrasing her expulsion as her having left it. He internally debates reminding her that he saved her from fellow guild members who meant to kill her, but concludes it would be fruitless since she showed little gratitude at the time. He tries to reassure her that the guild will not bother her, but this line of conversation backfires. Aludra senses he is concealing information, and, spinning around, she menacingly raises the heavy wooden pestle. With her teeth bared, she demands he tell her what he has heard. Cornered, Matt reluctantly reveals the grim news he learned from Shonchan soldiers. The Illuminators Guild essentially no longer exists. Its main chapter house in Tanchiko was destroyed after a confrontation with Shonchan forces, who believed the Illuminators had used the One Power. The Shonchan subsequently rounded up all surviving guild members and made them dakovale, property slaves. Aludra reacts with a mixture of grief and fury, turning back to her mortar and pounding it so violently that Matt worries the powder might explode. She calls her former colleagues fools for not knowing when to yield to a greater power. Through her tears, however, she declares with fierce defiance that as long as a single Illuminator lives, the guild lives on through her. She scoffs at Matt's initial simple idea of launching her fireworks from a catapult. He defends the suggestion before presenting a more refined concept he has developed, using the lofting tubes she employs for her displays, but positioned horizontally, to launch projectiles over a much greater distance, perhaps 1,000 paces, creating a primitive form of cannon. Aludra admits it is a clever idea for an amateur, but reveals she has contemplated such a weapon herself for a long time. She then proposes a riddle, saying that if he can deduce what use she would have for a bellfounder, she will share all of her secrets with him. Dismissing him for a few days, she makes a teasing remark about his pretty bottom, which causes Matt to flush with outrage. This leads to an internal monologue detailing his profound humiliation regarding his current attire. Queen Tylin has hidden his own clothes and had a new wardrobe made for him, featuring an indecently short blue coat with elaborate embroidery, tight scarlet breeches, a brilliant scarlet cloak, and an absurd amount of snowy lace at his wrists and neck. He feels like Tylin's possession, a garishly dressed toy, and the comment from Aludra only deepens his embarrassment. He limps out of her wagon into the grey, blustery afternoon, his mind occupied with Aludra's puzzle. As he moves through the sprawling camp of Valan Luca's travelling show, Matt reflects on his desperate situation. He feels trapped in Abu Dar as Tylin's plaything, while his friends, Rand, Perrin, Egwene, and Elaine, are likely achieving great things. He considers having his man Vanine steal horses for an escape, though his injuries would make riding difficult. He then encounters Olva, the young boy in his care, who is posturing and charming a group of giggling women with practiced flattery. Matt exasperatedly pulls the boy away, hypocritically advising him that women prefer quiet, reserved, and shy men, a piece of advice that earns him an incredulous stare from Olva. Moments later, one of the women pinches Matt's own bottom as he leaves. Finally, he rejoins Tom Merrilin and Beslan, who have been negotiating with Valan Luca. The arrogant showman dismisses Matt with a sour look and strides away. Tom delivers the disheartening news. While Luca has agreed to let them travel with his show, he demands a high price and, more problematically, does not plan to leave Abu Dar until the spring. This news crushes Matt, who fears what will become of him if he remains in Tylin's clutches for several more months. He masks his despair with a casual remark about having more time to win money at dice from the Shonchan. Beslan adds a darkly humorous comment about his mother's possessiveness, noting she would be displeased with him for helping her pretty escape. The chapter concludes as Tom and Beslan joke about a lady-in-waiting, but Matt is overcome by a familiar, dreaded sensation, the tumbling of dice in his head, a sure sign that something very bad is about to happen. Chapter 16. An Unexpected Encounter. The chapter begins with Matrim Cawthon, accompanied by Tom Merrilin, Beslan, and the boy Olver, making his way back toward the city of Ebudar after a visit to Luca's menagerie. The walk is a difficult one for Matt, as his recently healed leg aches with the exertion over the low hills. As they approach, the city's formidable white-plastered walls come into view, a structure historically impervious to siege weaponry. The city itself gleams white under the grey winter sky, showing only minor signs of damage from the swift and overwhelming Shonchan conquest. Matt reflects on how little the city's commercial life has been disrupted. The Shonchan actively encourage trade, provided that merchants and ship crews swear an oath of fealty to the forerunners and await the return. This pragmatic approach has resulted in a harbour more crowded than ever, though Matt no longer gazes at the ships from Tyr, Ilion, or Arad Doman with any hope of passage. The dice that often tumble in his mind as a warning of danger are now roaring like thunder, filling him with a deep sense of dread about what is to come. As they near the city's main gate, they encounter a significant traffic jam. A long column of wagons and ox carts waits to enter, while those exiting are predominantly Shonchan. Matt observes the distinct and foreign attire of the Shonchan elite, known as the Blood, with their voluminous trousers, high-collared coats, and intricately pleated riding dresses. Many riders are soldiers clad in brightly painted, overlapping plate armor, with helmets shaped like monstrous insects. Matt is careful to give them a wide berth, particularly avoiding the dreaded black and red of the Deathwatch Guard. His keen eye, however, still takes note of the horses, appraising a fine bay mare ridden by an angry Kaihyenin merchant, and mentally noting that she will likely be confiscated for a Shonchan officer under their lottery system, which claims 1 horse in 10 from outlanders. The gate itself is heavily guarded, not by soldiers, but by pairs of Suldam in their blue lightning-panelled dresses, leading grey-clad Domain on silver leashes. This presence serves to deter any potential channelers from entering the city. A grim display of severed heads on spikes serves as a stark reminder of Shonchan justice, with placards detailing crimes such as murder, rape, and rebellion. Matt notes with a grim sense of irony that this justice is applied to Shonchan and locals alike. Upon passing through the long tunnel of the gate, Matt and his companions are met with an astonishing sight. The streets, usually bustling, are now choked with an unprecedented flood of humanity, livestock, and wagons. The crowd is so dense that movement is nearly impossible. Matt observes spotted cattle with long horns, goats with fine hair hanging to the ground, and 4-horned sheep, all unfamiliar to him. He overhears the slow, drawling accents of the Shonchan, who are everywhere, pointing and gaping at the city's sights like provincial tourists. Tom Merrilin correctly identifies the cause of the chaos. The Karen, the Shonchan return, has arrived. Matt's previous conception of this event as a purely military invasion is shattered. He now understands it as a full-scale colonization, with farmers, craftspeople, and their entire livelihoods being transplanted. This, he realizes, is a far more permanent and difficult form of conquest to fight. This realization brings him into conflict with Beslan, who is incensed by the Shonchan takeover. Matt, wanting only to avoid Queen Tylin's increasingly possessive and public affections at the palace, tells the others to find their own way through the back streets. Beslan, however, reveals his simmering anger, explaining that while his mother Tylin still sits on the throne, she has been forced to swear fealty to the Shonchan Empress, and he is being pressured to marry into the Shonchan blood. He speaks of organizing a resistance to make Altara too hot to hold them, referencing a past guerrilla war against the White Cloaks. Matt, ever the pragmatist, harshly warns him of the futility and immense danger of such a plan, pointing out the overwhelming number of Shonchan soldiers and the constant threat of their network of spies, known as listeners. Tom, while attempting to cool Beslan's temper, expresses a certain understanding for the prince's patriotism and ironically notes Matt's own penchant for taking great risks despite his protests to the contrary. Left alone, Matt ventures into the chaotic city, hoping to find a dice game that will last late into the night and, more importantly, a small room to rent. He needs a place to secretly stash gold for his eventual escape from Queen Tylin, who has become alarmingly proprietary. His search is fruitless. The taverns are packed with celebrating Shonchan and sullen Ebo Dari, leaving no space for gambling. Every innkeeper tells him there are no rooms available. His bright, flamboyant clothing draws unwanted attention, making him a target for mockery from the Shonchan and aggression from resentful local men. Weary, cold, and hungry, with the dice still thundering in his head, he finally gives up and decides to return to the Tarasin Palace, taking a shortcut through a network of familiar, dark, and fetid alleyways. In a narrow, muddy passage, Matt suddenly trips and falls. In the next instant, a figure lands on his back, having clearly intended to ambush him from above. The attacker is the golem, the monstrous man-shaped creature that had nearly killed him before. A twist of luck, perhaps his Tavaran nature, caused him to trip just in time to avoid the brunt of the assault. As the golem recovers, Matt fumbles for the fox-head medallion around his neck. In a desperate, flailing defense, he swings the silver medallion, which sizzles and burns the creature's flesh on contact, forcing it to back away. The golem, snarling, reveals that it has been ordered to avoid notice, and for that reason alone, Matt will live a little longer. Just then, a man's shout from the street startles the creature. It flees, and in a display of its unnatural physiology, it pours its entire body through a small hole in a brick wall left by a single missing brick. Matt is then joined by a stoop-shouldered, white-haired old man who introduces himself as Noel Charin. Noel reveals that he was the one who shouted, a bluff to scare off what he thought was a common mugger. He expresses astonishment at the golem's impossible escape. Matt, hollowly, states that he has seen such a thing before in Shadar Logoth, a dark memory surfacing from his fragmented past. As they talk, Noel explains he is now homeless, having been evicted from his attic room to make way for a Shonchan officer. Matt, feeling a sense of obligation, offers to find him a better place to stay. The chapter concludes with Matt's dawning horror as he realizes that despite the terrifying and nearly fatal encounter with the golem, the dice in his head are still spinning, a clear and ominous sign that the true danger they were warning of has not yet passed. Chapter 17. Pink Ribbons. The chapter begins with Matt Cawthon and his new acquaintance Noel, moving swiftly through the wind-whipped and desolate Molhara Square in Ebu Dar. The sun is setting, casting long shadows, and Matt is in a state of high alert and physical discomfort. He is aching all over. His clothes are caked in mud. The mystical dice are rattling a warning inside his head, and he is consumed with paranoia about the golem, the creature that just attacked him, wondering about its capabilities and how it might pursue him. The public square, once a vibrant hub of city life, is now eerily empty due to the oppressive presence of the Shonchan, whose military and political authority emanates from the nearby Tarasin Palace. The palace, home to both Queen Tylin and the far more powerful High Lady Suroth, is heavily guarded by both Altaran and Shonchan soldiers. Deciding the stableyard offers a better chance of entry for a stranger like Noel, and an opportunity to clean himself before facing Tylin, Matt approaches the gate. There, he has a tense but familiar exchange with an Altaran officer named Serlevan Sarat. The officer jests about Matt having been in another brawl and warns him of Tylin's displeasure. The interaction is interrupted by the arrival of 3 mounted Shonchan, one of whom is an officer with dispatches for Suroth. A subtle but significant detail of political tension is revealed when the Shonchan formally request entry from the Altaran officer, Serlevan, rather than their own guards. When Noel naively questions what would happen if Serlevan refused, the officer's demeanor turns cold and rigid, warning that some questions are better left unasked in the occupied city. Matt quickly hustles Noel inside, explaining the danger of Shonchan surveillance through their listeners and the brutal reputation of their seekers. Inside the stableyard, they witness a grim spectacle. Numerous Shonchan Soldam are exercising their domain, who are women capable of channeling now controlled by magical leashes. Many of the domain are former seafolk windfinders, their faces etched with sullen resignation or utter confusion. Mat's attention is drawn to one domain in particular, Teslin Baradon, an Aes Sedai of the Red Arja. Though now collared and forced into placid obedience, she flashes a look of pure, undiluted hatred at Mat as she passes. The sight fills Mat with a grim pity, and he mutters that her fate is likely better than death, prompting a philosophical question from Noel about whether he truly believes that. Mat then leads Noel to the quarters of his remaining bodyguards, the Red Arms. He finds them relaxing, with the portly horse thief Vannin surprisingly engaged in reading a book. Mat instructs Noel to recount the golem attack, which the old man does with the flair of a gleeman, skillfully building up Mat's role while downplaying his own. The story sobers the men, especially Vannin and Harnan, who previously survived an encounter with the creature. Believing the golem is specifically targeting him, Mat makes a serious offer. He will provide gold for all of them, including Tom, Julin, and his serving men, to book passage on the first ship out of Abu Dar and return to the main army. However, his men unanimously refuse to abandon him, citing loyalty and, in Vannin's case, a comical excuse involving the boy Olver. Noel observes this interaction and astutely comments that Mat possesses a rare quality of leadership that inspires such devotion, suggesting his name may be remembered in history. Annoyed by their loyalty and a final barb from one of his men about cleaning up for the Queen, Mat stalks through the palace. His muddy appearance draws attention from numerous servants, who all knowingly suggest he bathe before Tylin sees him, revealing their awareness of the intimate and coercive nature of his relationship with the Queen. He then runs into Juilin Sandar, the Tyran thief-catcher. Mat repeats his offer to fund Juilin's departure, but the thief-catcher stubbornly refuses, hinting that a woman is keeping him in the city. As he leaves, Juilin delivers a final provocative message. He heard the Queen intends to take a switch to Mat if he returns in such a dishevelled state again. This final insult is the breaking point. Enraged, Mat flings open the doors to Tylin's apartments, ready for a confrontation. He stops dead, however, as the chaotic rattling of the dice in his head comes to an abrupt and thunderous halt, an event that has never happened before. The room contains not just Tylin, but also the High Lady Suroth and two mysterious Shonchan women, a small, veiled, and clearly high-ranking young woman named Tuon, and her tall, severe, and imperious companion, Anath. The power dynamic is immediately apparent, with Suroth appearing anxious in Tuon's presence, and Tuon herself showing deference to Anath. Tuon notices Mat's injuries and berates Suroth for the supposedly unsafe streets. To defuse the situation, Mat lies and claims he simply fell. Anath dismisses the matter, but Tuon approaches Mat, inspecting him with an impersonal curiosity, as if he were an animal for sale. This culminates in her shocking offer to purchase him from Tylin, a proposal that leaves both Tylin and Mat utterly stunned. Tylin, terrified, manages to explain that Mat is a free man and cannot be sold. Changing the subject, Tuon elevates Tylin by declaring she will be named one of the blood, the Shonchan nobility, and invites her to view maps of the lands she has been promised. Before they depart, Mat pulls Tylin aside and tries to use the golem threat as a reason for him to leave the city, but she possessively refuses. As she leaves, she whispers a chilling promise to him about seeing how he looks in pink ribbons. The chapter concludes with Mat left alone, his mind reeling not from the golem or Tylin's threats, but from the profound and unsettling mystery of why, after all this time, the dice had finally stopped. Chapter 18. An Offer. The period following the golem's assassination attempt settles into an irritating new normal for Mat Cawthon. He is trapped in Abu Dar by a constant grey sky and the lingering threat of the creature, which he believes is responsible for a wolf-like killing just outside the city walls, a detail that urbanites dismiss, but his own experience tells him is a sign the golem has not left. His companions remain stubbornly loyal. Harnan and the Red Arms insist on guarding him, and the horse trader Vannin stays for his own obscure reasons. Olva continues his lessons with Rizal, equally captivated by her physical charms and the stories she reads to him. This new routine is a source of constant friction for Matt, who feels his own agency slipping away. The situation is further complicated by Tom Merrilin and the young Lord Beslin, who embark on mysterious schemes of their own, excluding Matt and offering no explanation, leaving him to worry about the potential for useless bloodshed. Meanwhile, Julin Sandar continues a perilous affair, presumably with a Shonchan noblewoman, earning him a severe flogging. Despite the punishment and Matt's warnings, the thief-catcher's infatuation drives him back to the palace's upper floors, a foolhardy passion that Matt recognizes as a kind of fever that must run its course, even if it leads to Julin's execution. The city itself is undergoing a profound transformation under Shonchan occupation. A constant stream of ships disgorges settlers, soldiers, and exotic beasts into Ebu Dar. Matt observes bizarre creatures like the horse-sized, bronze-scaled Torm and the man-tall, flesh-rending Korlum. He learns about their military applications from common Shonchan soldiers, who prove to be approachable veterans hardened by the constant rebellions within their own vast empire. A formidable garrison remains in the city, an uneasy mix of Shonchan troops, conscripted Taraboners and Amadicians, and local Altarans, all held in a tense peace by the universally feared Deathwatch Guards. This elite force includes a contingent of 100 Ogier, known as Gardeners, whose grim demeanor is a stark contrast to Matt's friend Loyal, making them so intimidating that no one dares to cross them. News from the wider world seeps into the city, painting a picture of a continent in turmoil. Armies are marching across multiple nations, and tales of ale raids are rampant. The most potent rumors, however, concern Rand al'Thor. Conflicting stories circulate, that he is dead, that he has been captured by the White Tower, or that he has sworn fealty to the Amirlin seat. Matt internally dismisses these claims, feeling a deep, instinctual certainty that he would know if Rand were dead, and believing Rand is far too shrewd to willingly approach the White Tower. This news throws the Shonchan leadership into a frenzy of activity, increasing their patrols and their hunt for women who can channel. Driven by a renewed urgency to escape, Matt begins his plan by burning all the pink garments Queen Tylin had forced upon him, a symbolic act of reclaiming his identity. He seeks out a place to store his escape funds and gear, leading him to the Wandering Woman Inn. The establishment is now filled with high-ranking Shonchan officers, but the innkeeper, Setale Anan, agrees to help him. In a deeply humiliating exchange, she lectures him on the Altaran tradition of being a pretty before agreeing to rent him a cellar shelf and a hidden space beneath the kitchen floor, but only after she and a Shonchan officer mock his ornate clothing, with the officer even tossing him a coin. With a hiding place secured, Matt instructs his manservants, Nerim and Lopan, to covertly transfer his real clothes and his gold to the inn. He also attempts to enlist the help of Aludra, the Illuminator, for her knowledge of fireworks, and a bell founder named Sutoma for manufacturing components, but both endeavors fail. Aludra is receptive to his charms, but guards her secrets, while Master Sutoma is too preoccupied with a massive commission from the Shonchan to entertain Matt's strange requests. At the same time, Tylin becomes more possessive, adopting Shonchan customs and leaving her knife stuck in their bedpost as a summons, reinforcing Matt's feeling of being a pampered pet. His situation is made stranger still by a series of unsettling encounters with the young Shonchan noble Tuon. He finds her examining his Ashandare, the black-shafted spear he won at great personal cost, and she makes an imperious offer to buy it, which he curtly refuses. Her persistent, silent appearances in his path begin to unnerve him, reminding him of her previous offer to purchase him as property. Despite these complications, Matt feels his luck is finally turning. But as he contemplates the need to personally check on his hidden gold, he reflects with a sense of dread on why the dice, which so often rattle in his head to warn him of danger, have remained silent. Chapter 19. 3 Women. The chapter opens with Matt Cawthon making his way across the Mulhara under a cloudy sky that promised rain, prediction the locals associated with the northerly wind. He arrives at the Wandering Woman Inn, finding the common room once again filled with Shonchan patrons and the haze of pipe smoke. He observes a high-stakes card game involving lesser nobles, noting the large pile of gold in front of a small, dark-haired man, but dismisses it, as his own luck is better with dice. His purpose for being there is to check on his hidden gold, but the innkeeper, Mistress Annan, is out. Her daughter Mara is in charge and is clearly displeased to see him, remembering the two men who died by his hand during his previous stay. Matt attempts to charm her, fabricating a story about missing the inn's food and complimenting her appearance, specifically her skirt, which is sewn up to her thigh in a fashion her mother would not permit. His charm offensive fails as Mara is in a foul mood, harshly berating a serving maid named Kyra and her younger brother Ross. The brother retorts that her sour disposition is due to her younger sister recently marrying while she remains unasked, a comment that earns him a near slap. Mara maliciously tells Matt he will have a long wait to be served in the crowded room. Deciding to wait in the kitchen, Matt encounters the head cook, Enid, an immensely round woman who greets him with a knowing grin. She teases him about his romantic entanglement with Tylin, using a colourful metaphor about squeezing the wrong melon, which confirms to Matt that his humiliating situation is common knowledge and reinforces his desperate need to leave Abu Dar. After subtly confirming that the floorstone concealing his fortune is undisturbed, he praises Enid's cooking so lavishly that she beams and serves him a magnificent gilded fish. As he finishes his meal, Mistress Annan enters from the stable yard, followed by a second woman cloaked and hooded against the rain. Matt is stunned to recognize the second woman as Jolene Maza and Aes Sedai. Just as Mistress Annan begins to speak, a commotion erupts as a Shonchan officer and her attendant force their way into the kitchen. In a moment of sheer panic and quick thinking, Matt pulls Jolene onto his lap on a nearby bench and feigns a passionate kiss to hide her face. The intruders are identified as Captain Egeanin Tamarath and her Sojin, an oddly bearded Ilyana who seems familiar to Matt. Egeanin presents an order for rooms signed by the High Lady Suroth. Mistress Annan, unintimidated, calmly informs the captain that her best rooms are occupied by other high-ranking Shonchan officers. Instead of becoming enraged, Egeanin expresses admiration for the innkeeper's nerve, and the two women reach a tense but respectful understanding. Egeanin expresses her disgust at the display Matt and Jolene are making before departing. Once they are gone, Jolene breaks down, weeping hysterically on Matt's shoulder. Mistress Annan leads them to the cellar, explaining she discovered Jolene in the city and felt compelled to help a fellow sister. There, a traumatized Jolene reveals that her inability to escape the city during the initial invasion was not luck. She had been incapacitated by forkroot, which she venomously asserts was administered by Teslin, another Aes Sedai. Matt mentions a warning note he received, believing he owes Jolene a debt for it. Jolene states that any debt will be settled when he helps her escape, but Matt has a sickening realization. The note was slipped into his coat pocket, not left on his pillow as he had misremembered, meaning Jolene is not the one to whom he is indebted. Disturbed by this revelation, Matt returns to the Tarasin Palace and ascends to a hidden attic area that has been converted into makeshift cells for Domain. The scene is grim, with women kept in tiny rooms leashed by the Adam. He finds Teslin Baradon, who confesses that she did indeed write the note and dose Jolene, but her motive was simply to inconvenience Elida, the Emerlin seat, not to genuinely help Elaine and Nynaeve. Teslin then reveals the psychological horror of her captivity, admitting that she is being broken and has started to crave the Suldam's approval. In desperation, she agrees to do anything Matt asks if he can help her escape, but adds a complication. He must also rescue another captured sister, Edicina Azzadine. As Matt leaves the Domain kennels, he runs directly into Tuon. He quickly invents a story about looking for a windfinder to bring her pastries. For a moment, Tuon's severe expression softens into a beautiful smile as she commends his kindness to Domain, but she immediately warns him against being perceived as a pervert, and her cold mask returns. Overwhelmed by the immense task of rescuing 3 women, 1 in hiding and 2 collared, Matt recognizes he cannot succeed alone. He concludes that he needs the help of schemers and resolves to seek out Tom and Julian, his mind filled with the tune of a grim song, whose ancient title was The Last Stand at Mandanhar. Chapter 20. Questions of Treason. The chapter opens with Bethamin Zayami, a Suldam, ascending to the domain kennels located at the apex of the Tarasin Palace. She demonstrates a meticulous and disciplined nature, focusing intently on her duties and striving to embody the ideal of a perfect Suldam. She maintains a professional distance from her inspection partner Rena, a woman who was once a highly respected and confident trainer, but has become a meek and subservient figure since the events at Falmer. Bethamin observes that Rena is now bullied by almost everyone, a consequence of her former pride, and Bethamin herself participates in this dynamic to a small degree to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Her internal thoughts reveal a calculated ambition. She seeks difficult assignments to prove her worth, all while harboring deep secrets she meticulously conceals. During the inspection, Bethamin's methods are shown to be both firm and fair. She checks each kennel for neatness and rewards well-behaved domain with hard candies, earning smiles from many who recognize her fairness. She notes the sullen resistance of the newly collared Athan Mier women, viewing their anger as a predictable and temporary phase in their inevitable journey toward acceptance. Her analysis focuses on 2 particular cases that require special attention. First is Zushi, an Athan Mier Daman who is clearly suffering from despondency, evidenced by her tears and weight loss. Bethamin, feeling a sense of responsibility, recommends a compassionate approach, moving Zushi to a double kennel with an experienced domain from the Empire to foster a comforting friendship. The second case is Tessie, an Illionaire who once called herself Aes Sedai. Bethamin is immediately suspicious of Tessie's sudden and perfect compliance, correctly identifying it as a facade meant to deceive her captors. For this perceived threat, Bethamin prescribes a harsh and psychologically manipulative regimen of redoubled punishments and sporadic, unpredictable rewards. She understands this method is cruel and will break Tessie's spirit, but she deems it a necessary evil to ensure the woman's complete submission and erase her past identity. After completing her duties and delegating the delivery of her report to the timid Rena, Bethamin walks through the city, intending to shop for souvenirs. However, her mind is consumed by the past, specifically by Rena and another Suldam named Seta. The narrative then reveals Bethamin's profound and terrifying secret from Falme. During the chaos of the battle, she discovered Rena and Seta frantically and painfully trying to remove Adam collars from each other's necks, thus revealing themselves to be Marath domain, women who could channel. This horrifying sight ignited a personal terror within Bethamin, as she possesses abilities such as sensing a domain's presence and almost seeing the weaves of the One Power. That placed her dangerously close to being a channeler herself. Believing that a new, more rigorous testing of all Suldam was imminent, she was overcome with fear of being discovered and collared. This fear drove her to commit an act of treason. She deserted her post, fled the battle, and abandoned the Empire. She later learned that High Lady Suroth had covered up the truth about Rena and Seta, rendering Bethamin's desperate flight and subsequent hardships entirely pointless. This history fills her with a curdling shame, and she now lives a life dedicated solely to preserving her own freedom, her outward display of perfect duty a carefully constructed lie. Returning to her inn, the Golden Swans of Heaven, Bethamin is briefly confronted by the innkeeper, who warns her about a yellow-haired man who had been asking for her by name. Troubled by this, she proceeds to her room only to find the man inside, her locked strongbox open and her diary in his hands. He is revealed to be a seeker for truth, identified by a gold-edged ivory plaque. Bethamin is paralyzed with the certainty that her own secret has been exposed. However, the seeker is not interested in her. He reveals that he knows she has been making inquiries about a ship captain named Egeanin Sana, whom Bethamin knew from Falme. The seeker coerces Bethamin into becoming his unwilling agent, ordering her to renew her acquaintance with Egeanin, who has since been raised to the blood, and to report on all of her activities. He then discloses a vast and dangerous conspiracy, accusing the High Lady Suroth of profound treason. He alleges that Suroth is secretly collaborating with Aes Sedai, may have orchestrated the murder of High Lord Turak at Falmer, and is hiding other Marath Damane. The Seeker believes Egianin is a crucial thread that can unravel this entire treacherous plot, and he intends to use Bethamin to pull that thread. Trapped and terrified, with no other choice, Bethamin agrees to obey his commands. Chapter 21. A Matter of Property. The chapter opens with Egianin, a newly promoted captain of the Green, lying on a bed in an inn called the Wandering Woman, feeling constrained by her pleated dress and overly long fingernails, which she views as symbols of a life removed from the practicalities of the sea. She internally reflects on her past ambitions, which included rising to the rank of captain of the Gold like her mother, and even dreaming of becoming the hand of the Empress at sea. While her recent promotion is a significant advancement, her current situation fills her with unease. She questions why the High Lady Suroth, after seemingly accepting her story, has left her idol in Cantarin and then ordered her to Ibu Dar without a specific command, fueling her suspicion that Suroth does not fully trust her. Compounding her anxiety is the looming threat of a seeker for the truth, who she is certain is still watching her, waiting for any misstep. Although her new rank should offer protection, she knows the Seekers are adept at circumventing such obstacles, and that a single mistake could lead to her downfall. Her thoughts are interrupted by Baal Doman, her Sojin, who is rehashing his old argument that his ship, the Seahawk, could have outrun the Shonchan vessel that captured them. Egianin, with practiced patience, reiterates the logic of her past actions, explaining that surrender was the only choice to avoid their destruction by domain and their subsequent enslavement or execution. She points out that by claiming they were bringing a gift to the Empress, she allayed suspicion and saved their lives, reminding him that his own lack of composure is what led to him being put on the auction block, where she was forced to spend a great deal of money to purchase him. The conversation then shifts dramatically when Baal, in a moment of startling sincerity, suggests they find a wise woman to perform a marriage ceremony. He acknowledges that for this to happen, she must first free him from his status as Sojin. This proposal completely destabilizes Egianin. She finds herself in a profound internal conflict, wanting wholeheartedly to marry the man, but recoiling from the social implications and personal difficulty of marrying someone she legally views as manumitted property. She uses the excuse that she cannot yet afford to buy him a ship, a requirement for his manumission, to avoid confronting her own deep-seated prejudices. Their tense moment is broken by a knock at the door, which reveals Bethamin, a Suldam whom Egianin had secretly freed in Tanchico. Bethamin is distraught and reveals that the very seeker Egianin fears has found her and is forcing her to act as an informant, ordering her to report on all of Egianin's activities. This confirms Egianin's worst fears and explains her strange orders to Ebu Dar. Bethamin then relays the Seeker's fantastical conspiracy theory, a web of treason he has constructed that connects Egianin, Baal, High Lady Suroth, and even the Daughter of the Nine Moons with Aes Sedai and renegade Domain. While Egianin knows most of it is nonsense woven from happenstance, she is chilled by the elements of truth it contains, particularly her own treasonous intention to dispose of the male Adam. In her terror, Bethamin suggests that the Seeker should suffer an accident to end the threat. After dismissing the panicked Bethamin, Egianin is overwhelmed by the seemingly inescapable trap the Seeker has laid. In a moment of desperation, she attempts to write out Baal's manumission papers, hoping to send him to safety. However, Baal takes the document from her and burns it, refusing to leave. He cleverly uses her own rules against her, stating she cannot legally free him until she can provide for his livelihood, which in his case means a ship. Instead of fleeing, he proposes a plan. He reveals that he has seen Matt Cawthon and Tom Merrilin in the city, men he knows from past encounters involving Trollocs and Murdrol. He vouches for their resourcefulness in dangerous situations and suggests they recruit them for help. The mention of Merrilin, who was with the Aes Sedai she met in Tanchico, briefly makes Egeanin question if a conspiracy is real, but Baal reassures her of his loyalty regardless. The chapter concludes with Egeanin agreeing to his plan, her own resolve hardening as she accepts that she must do whatever it takes to stop the Seeker, realizing with a sense of dread that her desperation now mirrors Bethamin's. Chapter 22. Out of Thin Air. The narrative opens in the Amhara market within the city of Farmading, a trading square notable for its stark, stonework appearance and lack of traditional market stalls. The city is characterized by its stone architecture and the biting cold winds blowing off the surrounding lake. Amidst a sparse crowd, Rand al-Thor discreetly follows Manel Rochaid, a renegade Ashaman. Rand's appearance has been altered. His hair is dyed black, and he wears nondescript woolen clothing to blend in, successfully avoiding attention despite his height. He internally dismisses the cold, focusing entirely on his pursuit, while the voice of Luz Therin in his mind cries out in panic, viewing their presence in Farmading as a death trap. Rochaid, in contrast, is ostentatiously dressed in a bright red silk coat and a billowing cloak, his hand resting on his sword hilt, attracting the notice of the city's formidable street guards. Foreigners, especially armed ones, are treated with deep suspicion in Farmading, and Rand observes that Rochaid's arrogance makes him a fool. Rand reflects that Rochaid and the other renegades, Torval, Dashiva, Gedwin and Kisman, have been successfully baited. He had deliberately left a series of subtle clues, such as misplaced maps and books, that when pieced together would point directly to Farmading. He is determined to eliminate them individually before they can group together, acknowledging that even in this city where the one power is inaccessible to him, a fight against all of them at once would be perilous. As Rand tails Rochaid from the market onto the more affluent Street of Joy, the scenery shifts to wealthier establishments like goldsmiths and tailors, with ornate coaches and liveried servants becoming more common. The presence of the street guards remains constant and vigilant. During the pursuit, Rand is momentarily struck by a wave of dizziness and sees a murky face in his vision, stumbling into a tall Isleman who is working as a servant. This encounter underscores the strange fate of many Isle who, after learning the truth of their history, have come to Farmading to attempt to follow the way of the leaf. Suddenly, Rand loses sight of Rochaid and fears he has squandered his chance, but then spots the man's cloak disappearing around a corner. He quickens his pace, carefully navigating the watchful eyes of the street guards, and follows Rochaid into a labyrinth of narrow, crooked alleyways in a poorer district. Within this maze, where there are no guards, Rochaid's footsteps echo until they abruptly cease. Realizing he has walked into a trap, Rand proceeds cautiously. He turns a corner to find Rochaid waiting, sword partially drawn, smugly declaring that Rand was easy to bait. However, Rand reacts with blinding speed, slamming Rochaid's sword back into its scabbard and delivering a devastating strike to his throat. As he prepares a finishing blow, he hears a noise behind him and understands the true nature of the ambush. He throws himself to the ground, pulling Rochaid down with him, just as a second assailant, Rayfar Kisman, lunges. Kisman's blade, intended for Rand, impales Rochaid instead. Before a new fight can begin, the rattling sound of approaching street guards fills the air. Recognizing that being caught over a dead body would lead to their execution, Kisman and Rand are forced to flee in opposite directions. Kisman melts back into the city crowds, furious that Rochaid's vanity nearly got them both killed. He internally wrestles with the contradictory orders he and the other renegades have received regarding Rand. The Mahel, Taim, had ordered them to kill al-Thor, but was displeased by their failure and discovery in Caerhien. The Forsaken Demandred had also commanded them to kill him, but emphasized that they must not be discovered again. More recently, another of the Chosen, Moradin, had stated that killing al-Thor was secondary to bringing him everything in the man's possession. As Kisman contemplates this confusion, he feels a sudden sting in his arm and sees a bloodstain spreading on his sleeve. A man whispers, "He belongs to me," but vanishes into the crowd before Kisman can see him. A horrific transformation begins as Kisman's hand turns black and bloated, the poison acting with unnatural speed. He runs in a panic, desperate to escape the city, but collapses and dies, his last thought being that one of the chosen had punished him. Rand returns to his inn, the Crown of Moredo, and signals Lan to prepare for their departure. He then finds Min, Nynaeve, and Olivia in the women's room. He urges them to pack, explaining the ambush and Kisman's escape. While packing, Min observes through their bond that she felt no fear or anger from him during the life-or-death struggle, a coldness which deeply troubles her. Rand dismisses her concern, stating Rochaid simply needed to be killed. As they discuss how to find the remaining renegades, Rand has a startling realization. He knows he can draw their faces with perfect accuracy, a skill he has never possessed, but one that Luz Therin had. This moment of chilling mental integration passes without him feeling the fear it should have evoked. In a separate scene, the narrative shifts to an assassin who is identified as both Izam and Luke. Moving through the dream world of Tel Arandriod, he enters a darkened bedroom in the waking world. He brutally murders the two sleeping occupants, only to realize afterward that they were not his intended targets, his nephew and a woman. He then steps back into Tel Arandriod to report his failure to his mysterious patron, a blurred figure who is clearly one of the chosen. This powerful being tells him to wait for further instructions before trying again, confirming that another highly skilled agent is also hunting Rand in Far Madding. Chapter 23, To Lose the Sun. The chapter commences with Shaylon, a seafolk windfinder, struggling to manage both an unfamiliar woolen cloak and the unpredictable nature of a horse as she follows her sister Hareen and the swordmaster Moad through a gateway woven by Cadswane Melaidrin. The portal transports them from the Sun Palace to a cold, desolate clearing marked by stunted, gnarled trees and patches of snow. Shalon, accustomed to the stability of a ship's deck, feels deeply unnerved by the treacherousness of her mount, constantly trying to soothe the animal. Cadswane, in stark contrast, sits upon her own horse with perfect ease, maintaining the gateway weave without any apparent effort or discomfort from the biting cold. Shaylon feels the formidable Aes Sedai's gaze upon her and desperately wishes to understand the weave for travelling, yet she is consumed by a desire to find some means of escape from Cadswane's influence. She resolves to study the complex interpersonal dynamics among the Aes Sedai, believing that the strong, hidden currents between them could reveal a vulnerability she might exploit. As the rest of the party emerges, Shalon observes the other Aes Sedai and their warders. She notes with suspicion the presence of very young men, like Eben, who she is sure she previously saw wearing the black coat of an Ashaman, now seemingly serving as warders. This anomaly draws the sharp, analytical gazes of other sisters like Kumira. Meanwhile, Hareen, the wave mistress, begins a litany of complaints, her voice sharp with indignation. She resents Cadswane's imperious manner and the strict conditions imposed upon her, which have stripped her of her customary entourage and reduced her, in her own eyes, to the status of a common deck girl. Her frustration is a recurring theme, voiced repeatedly since the previous night. Moad, her loyal swordmaster, remains a silent and observant presence, comfortable on his horse and openly studying the Aes Sedai with a critical eye. Shalon, caught between her sister's tirade and her own covert observations, must play the part of a dutiful subordinate. The tension escalates when Hareen demands Shaylon learn the secret of travelling at any cost. She commands Shaylon to offer herself to Cadswane as a spy against Hareen herself, believing the Aes Sedai will be swayed by such a greedy and treacherous proposition. This order throws Shaylon into a state of quiet panic, as she has already been coerced into an agreement with Cadswane to provide information in order to protect a deeply personal and damaging secret of her own. Hareen's command places her in an impossible position, forcing her into a dangerous game of double agency that she is certain to lose, with the potential consequences being professional ruin and the destruction of her marriage. Her turmoil is interrupted by the arrival of Serena Nemdal, a white Arja, who has been assigned by Kadswan to serve as Hareen's attendant. Hareen's reaction to Serena is bizarrely hostile and defensive, snapping about orders that have been carried out and should now be forgotten. Her strange behavior, which puzzles both Shaylin and Moad, suggests a hidden history between the Wave Mistress and this particular Aes Sedai. The group begins their journey southward, riding toward a city Kadswane names as Far Madding. Shalon is relegated to riding behind Kadswane, Alana and Verin, and uses the opportunity to continue her analysis of the Aes Sedai. She mentally sorts them into two factions, or boats, noting a subtle but distinct animosity between Kadswane's inner circle and another group that includes Nasun and Arian. It appears as though some unforgivable crime has created a deep schism among them, expressed through minute gestures of defiance and contempt that are invisible to the untrained eye, but clear to Shaylon. Her suspicions about the male channelers serving as warders grow, and she begins to see this unorthodox bonding as a potential secret sharp enough to cut herself free from Kadswane's control. Her thoughts are so focused that Serene startles her by murmuring that the men can no longer channel. Probing further, Shalon learns the astonishing truth about their destination. Serene reluctantly explains that Far Madding is protected by a powerful terangriel that creates an effect akin to a steading, nullifying the one power. Within the city's confines, no one can channel or even sense the true source. This revelation elicits a thin, satisfied smile from Hareen, who relishes the thought of the formidable Aes Sedai being rendered powerless. As their party approaches the city, they ride onto a spit of land and the connection to the source abruptly vanishes. For Shalon, the sensation is one of profound emptiness, a chilling void where a constant, comforting presence used to be. The world feels colder and more threatening without it. At the bridge leading to Far Madding, they are stopped by city guards who operate with a brisk bureaucratic indifference. They record the names of all foreigners and, most significantly, peace bond the swords of all the men, wrapping the hilts and scabbards in wire secured with lead seals to prevent them from being drawn. This procedure, which even Moad accepts with a stoic shrug, underscores the city's absolute prohibition on violence. As Shaylon finally rides through the city gates, the external world blurs into insignificance. She is wholly consumed by the internal experience of being severed from the power, a loss so profound she can only compare it to having the sun itself extinguished from the sky, leaving her in a state of terrifying spiritual darkness. Chapter 24. Among the Councils. The chapter begins with Shaylin in a disoriented state, shaken awake by the Aes Sedai Serena. They have arrived at their destination within a vast, round plaza in the city of Far Madding. Shalon is deeply affected by the absence of the one power, a pervasive emptiness she compares to being cored like a piece of fruit. Before them stands the Hall of the Councils, an impressive round palace of white stone topped by a massive blue dome. Shalon observes the intricate carvings on the building's exterior, which depict trade and commercial success through images of diademed women, sheaves of grain, bolts of cloth, and stacks of ingots. Her internal analysis is critical. She views such a blatant display of wealth as a strategic folly, one that breeds jealousy and invites others to drive hard bargains. She feels a pang of shame for her momentary weakness and, when confronted by a frowning Hareen, apologizes and vows to fulfill her duty despite the profound sense of loss. Kadswan leads the group directly into the hall, entering what appears to be an indoor stable yard. Their arrival surprises the various men in blue coats who attend to sedan chairs and coaches, all marked with the sigil of a golden sword and hand. A plump, unctuous man, evidently a high-ranking steward, attempts to redirect them, but Kadswane cuts him off with imperious authority. She announces herself as Kadswane Melidrin, a name that visibly shocks and frightens the steward, who had thought her long gone. She dismisses his offers of a waiting room and instead dispatches him to inform the First Council, Alais Barsala, of her arrival, commanding him to run. As she gives orders for the care of the horses and directs her party, she singles out Verin and Kumira to accompany her, while pointedly ordering Marise to keep a sulky Alana from leaving. As they wait, Hareen questions Sarain about the First Council, learning she is the effective ruler of Far Madding, a position descended from the queens of a fallen nation called Maredo. This information solidifies Hareen's resolve to meet Alice, as her dignity as a wave mistress demands an audience with her counterpart. Kadswane agrees to include Hareen and Shaylin, but excludes Hareen's swordmaster, further vexing the wave mistress. Kadswane then leads them at a grueling pace up a series of unsupported swooping staircases, a journey that taxes both Shalon and Hareen. They finally emerge onto a gilded balcony high within the massive dome, an architectural feat that leaves Shaylin in awe. Kadswane instructs Kumira to show the seafolk women the source of the power's absence, Far Madding's guardian. Kumira explains that the city's rulers are hostile to channelers and use this guardian to enforce their pretense that the power does not exist. She alludes to Kadsuan's reputation for humbling the arrogant, noting her last visit during the Ale War left a lasting, fearful impression. Looking down, Shalon sees a floor tiled in a maze pattern. Set into this floor are 3 large clouded crystal discs, each with a clear crystal wedge pointing toward the center. Shalon realizes with a surge of terror that this deceptively simple-looking device is the Terangreo that has stolen the light from her. Their observation is interrupted by the arrival of the city's leadership. 12 women in flowing blue robes, led by the First Council, Alais Barsala. Alais is stately and regal, and she delivers a grand formal welcome exclusively to Harina, completely ignoring Kadswane. In a masterful display of political maneuvering, Kadswane forces Alais to acknowledge her by brazenly accepting a non-existent offer of accommodation in the palace. Bound by a previous bargain, Hareen is compelled to support Kadswane, stating that she will not stay where Kadswane is unwelcome. Kadswane twists the knife further with a public remark about correcting Alice's bad habits in the past, a humiliating comment that causes the other councils to eye their leader with new speculation. The tense standoff is broken when Verin announces that a man has just channeled. Below them, the Guardian activates. The clear wedges in the discs turn black and swivel to indicate the direction of the channeling. As the attendants below begin to triangulate the position, Alice calmly dismisses the event as an insignificant ashaman. Verin, using the alias Edwina, then launches into a seemingly innocent but deeply threatening monologue. She references the historical conqueror, Gwaire Amalasan, who captured Far Madding without using the power, subtly linking his success to the potential threat posed by the Dragon Reborn's non-channeling Isle armies. She continues by suggesting that while the Dragon Reborn is likely preoccupied with the Shonchan, it would be deeply unwise for Far Madding to anger him. Shalon realizes this entire event, including the channeling, was a calculated demonstration orchestrated by Kadswane's party. Attempting to regain control, Alais invites Verin for a private talk, effectively splitting the group. As they depart, Kadswane immediately begins to intimidate the 2 councils assigned to escort them. In the chapter's closing moments, a rare instance of tenderness occurs between the sisters. Hareen confesses her own fear at the loss of the source, comparing it to being struck blind, and offers Shalon genuine comfort, recalling a childhood memory. This moment of connection quickly shifts back to strategy, as Hareen tasks Shalon with discovering Kadswane's true purpose. Moved by her sister's unexpected warmth, Shalon feels a shift within herself. For the first time, she considers confessing the secret of the bargain Kadswane forced upon her, a secret that has been the source of immense personal torment. Chapter 25. Bonds. The chapter opens with Rand al'Thor in his room at the Council's Head Inn in Far Madding, a place of significantly better quality than his previous lodging. He occupies himself by playing a silver-mounted flute a gift from Tom Merrilin, but the tune he plays, Lament for the Long Night, is not one he has ever learned. It flows from the memories of Luz Therin Telemon, the man sharing his mind, who weeps internally as the mournful notes fill the room. This moment highlights the deepening integration of Luz Therin's consciousness, where skills and sorrows from another age are now Rand's own. Min paces the room, her anxiety palpable. She is deeply concerned about the presence of Alana Mosvani in the city, fearing that Alana could inadvertently or deliberately expose Rand's location to Elida and the White Tower. Her distress is a stark contrast to Rand's quiet resignation. The narrative explores the nature of Rand's warder bonds. The connection he shares with Min, Elaine, and Avienda feels as natural as breathing, a source of comfort and strength. Conversely, the bond forced upon him by Alana feels like an unwelcome intrusion, constant, grating presence. Min's agitation culminates in her throwing a knife into the door, a physical manifestation of her fierce protectiveness. Their conversation shifts to another source of Min's fear, her viewing that a former Suldam named Olivia will help Rand die. Rand interprets this with a calm fatalism, stating that helping him die is not the same as killing him, and that his death is an unavoidable part of the prophecies. He expresses a weariness so profound that death seems almost a relief, a sentiment echoed fervently by Luz Therin. Min vehemently rejects this, insisting that she will not allow him to die and will even follow him into death to bring him back. Her love and determination provide a brief moment of levity, breaking the tension as she playfully threatens him with a long life. Their intimate moment is interrupted by a knock, and expecting Alana, Min playfully positions herself atop Rand. However, it is Cadsuane Melaidrin who enters, her imposing presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. Alana follows shortly after, and Rand senses a complex storm of emotions from her through the bond, fury and nervousness, but also an overwhelming and unexpected joy at being near him again. Rand confronts Cadsuane, who is characteristically dismissive of his questions about how she learned to travel and found him. She reveals that she has brought a considerable entourage, including 6 other Aes Sedai, the Seafolk delegation led by Hareen, and the 3 Ashaman who had been with him. This news throws Rand into a panic, as such a large group will make it impossible to remain discreet. He is forced to humble himself and plead with Cadsuane to keep his location a secret, which she agrees to after he shows some manners. She then delivers another shocking piece of news. 3 of the Ashaman have been bonded as warders by Aes Sedai. Rand's ensuing curse earns him a powerful slap from Cadsuane, a stark reminder of her dominance and refusal to tolerate his temper. Once alone with Alana, their own confrontation erupts. She is furious about being left behind and demands to know what he did that caused her to be unconscious for 3 days. When Rand coldly reveals that he allowed others to bond him, Alana's fury peaks, her sense of possession laid bare as she snarls, "You are mine!" Rand offers to release Alana from her oath of fealty if she will release him from the bond, but she refuses. She reveals she was so desperate that she offered to pass the bond to Cadsuane, who refused. Alana asserts that her responsibility for him is as strong as her oath, and she will not release him to anyone she deems incapable of handling him. Their conversation is a vessel for more critical revelations. Alana informs Rand that one of the bonded Ashaman, Dharma Flynn, has discovered a method to heal Stilling, a miraculous development that has already been used on several of the captive sisters. Furthermore, every single Aes Sedai captured at Dumai's Wells, including the Reds, has sworn fealty to him. This is a monumental political shift. Alana then passionately argues that Rand must accept the help of the Aes Sedai, who can use their political acumen to quell rebellions in Caerhien and Tyr, and secure his power in ways he has so far failed to achieve. Realizing the foolishness of his paranoia, Rand accepts her logic. He gives Alana a mission, to return to Caerhien and dispatch 4 of the sisters he trusts to negotiate an end to the rebellion in Tyr. Though disappointed to be sent away so soon, Alana accepts, her joy at being near him reignited by the prospect of returning. She asks why he is in Far Madding, a place that severs him from the source. But he lies, knowing her protective instincts as a green sister would compel her to interfere with his dangerous purpose. The chapter's perspective then shifts to Verin Mathwin, who meets with Cadsuan. She witnesses Cadsuan calmly dismissing a frantic Elsa, who is furious that their only link to finding Rand has been sent away. In their private conversation, Cadsuan reveals her true, profound objective. She is not concerned with Rand's immediate plans, but with his deteriorating humanity. She perceives him turning into a stone and believes that if he cannot relearn how to laugh and cry, winning the last battle will be a hollow victory. She understands she must wait for Rand to come to her for help, as he resists any guidance that is not sought. Satisfied that Cadsuan's aims are to preserve Rand's soul, not just his life, Verin discreetly puts away a vial of poison, her suspicions allayed for the moment. Chapter 26. Expectation. The chapter begins with Elaine walking alongside Egwene through a dream version of Eamon's Field, a location they access through Teleran Ariod. Elaine is saddened by the village's transformation, while Egwene appears completely stunned. Elaine observes how her friend's dream self has altered, her appearance shifting from the simple country girl she once was to a figure of authority in fine silks, reflecting her new station as the Amirlin seat. The Eamon's Field they witness is no longer a quiet village, but a bustling and prosperous town, boasting multi-story stone buildings, paved streets, and a formidable new defensive wall. This growth is a physical manifestation of the profound changes their lives have undergone. While observing a new battle monument, Egwene reflects on the region's ancient history and the battles of Manetheren. Elaine, however, has a more immediate political concern, as she briefly glimpses the banner of the Red Eagle, the symbol of Manetheren, which represents a potential threat to the stability of Andor. Their conversation reveals Egwene's own struggles with her new role. She confesses that she is not yet ready to face her hometown as Amirlin, having had to discipline old friends who fail to respect her authority. The discussion then shifts to military matters, with Elaine refusing an offer of soldiers from Egwene, understanding that Egwene needs every man for her assault on Tar Valon. Their meeting is punctuated by a moment of deep gravity when Egwene shares disturbing rumors that Rand has been chaining Aes Sedai as if they were domain. She implores Elaine, as someone who loves him, to report anything she learns of his plans, underscoring a growing tension between the White Tower's future and Rand's increasingly extreme actions. Returning to the waking world, Elaine finds herself exhausted and overwhelmed by her duties in Kemlin. The morning begins with a light-hearted but telling interaction with Avienda, with whom she shares a bed, showcasing their growing sisterly bond through mutual teasing about their different customs. Elaine's life is now a web of political and personal pressures, exemplified by the strict diet imposed upon her due to her pregnancy and the constant need for vigilance. This vigilance takes a calculated and unsavory form with her handling of Captain Doylan Mella. She deliberately fosters the public rumor that Mella is the father of her unborn child, explaining privately to a shocked Avienda that this deception is a necessary shield to protect Rand's heir from political enemies. Her day continues with a series of official reports. Her chief clerk, Master Norrie, confirms that she has secured crucial financing from city bankers and provides intelligence updates, including the unnerving news that the large Borderlander army to the north remains stationary and that rumors persist of Aes Sedai swearing fealty directly to Rand. Subsequently, her first maid, Reen Harfor, reports on the discovery of several spies within the palace staff. Following the advice of her mother and Tom Merrilin, Elaine decides not to expose them, but rather to use them as channels for feeding misinformation to her opponents. The day is filled with tedious meetings with merchant delegations, all subtly probing her relationship with the Dragon Reborn and the potential impact on trade. As the day wears on, her profound weariness becomes ever more apparent. In a moment of respite, Avienda forces her to take a walk for fresh air, where they witness the unexpected return of the Aes Sedai Merilili via a gateway. Merilila brings urgent news from her reconnaissance mission, reporting that the 4 rulers of the borderlands are encamped with an army of over 200,000 soldiers and at least 10 Aes Sedai. Most critically, they have specifically requested a meeting with Elaine, as they are somehow aware of her deep connection to Rand. Recognizing both a significant opportunity and a potential danger, and driven by a fierce resolve to protect her child from all threats, Elaine decides to act immediately, resolving to travel with Merilil to meet the rulers that very day. Chapter 27. To Surprise: Queens and Kings. The chapter opens with immediate and forceful opposition to Elaine's plan from her closest companions. Avienda labels the endeavour as profoundly unwise, her stance rigid and disapproving as she stands over Elaine. Birgitte, with her characteristic bluntness and frustration, palpable through the warder bond, scoffs at the notion of wisdom, arguing that surprising monarchs is a recipe for disaster based on her own extensive experiences. She advocates for a more conventional diplomatic approach, suggesting Merilil arrange a formal parley in a few days. Elaine, however, remains resolute, explaining that her primary goal is to catch the borderland rulers off guard to better gauge what they truly know about her. Despite her weariness having dissipated with the news, her hand trembles slightly as she attempts to draft a letter, carefully wording it as from an Aes Sedai of the Green Arja rather than the daughter heir of Andor. She further exasperates Birgitte by insisting on a minimal escort, just herself, her warder and Avienda, framing the excursion as a simple meeting, not an adventure. The rest of her bodyguard is also displeased, with Casey having to be ordered out of the room after demanding to bring the entire protective detail. A flurry of preparations ensues, a whirlwind of activity orchestrated by Elaine. She consults with Vandene for last-minute insights into the borderlands, has Isander prepare suitable attire, and informs her staff of their duties in her absence. Mistress Harfer is tasked with managing delegations, and is also informed that she has acquired goats to provide Elaine with milk. Rianne is summoned to create the gateway, a task given to her because of her ability to precisely open a portal to a specific clearing in Brame Wood she knows from Merilil's earlier journey, thus avoiding a potentially long and difficult trek through fresh snow. Elaine is careful to keep the sea folk uninformed of her plans, fearing that the domineering wave mistress Zaida might insist on accompanying them and ruin the delicate negotiations. Soon, Elaine, Avienda, and Birgitte are riding through the snow-covered Braham Wood, having followed an hour after Merilile, who carried Elaine's letter. Elaine is dressed in the simple green of an Aes Sedai, her only adornment a small turtle-shaped engrail. The conversation once again turns to the risks of her plan, with Avienda and Birgitte continuing their attempts to dissuade her. Elaine correctly deduces that their heightened protectiveness stems from their knowledge of her pregnancy, a fact which they sheepishly concede through their embarrassment. After a ride of nearly 2 hours, they are met by a party of stoic, heavily armoured Shienaran soldiers, led by a Lord Kayan Yokata. He formally guarantees their safety, a gesture that Elaine finds more alarming than comforting, as it implies there was a question of it in the first place. They are escorted into a sprawling military camp and led to a large tent where Merilil and the 4 rulers of the borderlands await. The reception is stark and without ceremony. Elaine is introduced simply as an Aes Sedai. She meets the wise and sad-eyed Isar of Shienar, the regal and dignified Etheniel of Kandor, the broad and handsome Paitar of Arafel, and the youthful, imperious, and lavishly dressed Tenobia of Saldea. Tenobia immediately voices her skepticism, noting Elaine's youth and openly questioning the presence of an ale-woman. Elaine diffuses the tension by formally introducing Avienda as her sister and Birgitte as her warder, announcements that cause some surprise, but are quickly accepted by the pragmatic rulers. Employing a strategy of bold attack as taught to her by Gareth Brine, Elaine immediately seizes control of the meeting. She frames the encounter not as her petitioning them, but as them having requested an audience with her, a subtle but significant shift in power. The rulers reveal their true purpose, They have marched their armies south not to invade Andor, but to find the dragon reborn. They question Elaine because of her known connection to him at Falme. Elaine counters by questioning why they have brought entire armies if they merely wish to send a message. The conversation touches upon the schism in the White Tower, with Tenobia bluntly asking which faction Elaine follows, a question skillfully deflected by Merilil, who rebukes the Queen for prying into the Tower's internal affairs. Elaine offers a calculated deal. She truthfully states she cannot give them Rand's exact location, but knows he intends to remain in one place for a time. She promises to provide them with what information she can, but only if they agree to march their armies south into Andor within the week. The borderland rulers quickly deduce her underlying strategy. Their apparent invasion will force the wavering Andoran houses to rally to her cause, solidifying her claim to the Lion Throne without a civil war. In return, she will ensure they can leave Andor peacefully once her goal is achieved. After a moment of silent consideration, they agree to her terms. Elaine then misdirects them, telling them a search in Murundi will be profitable. This is a clever deception, as Egwene's army has just departed that region, and it serves to move the borderlanders further away from Rand's actual location. After concluding the unexpectedly swift negotiations, Elaine and her party depart. She notices that the rulers, except for Tenobia, who is excited to see her uncle Davram Basha, seem more relieved than exultant, suggesting a deep apprehension about actually meeting the dragon reborn. Back in the snowy woods, Elaine uses her angriel to weave a gateway back to a field just outside Caemlyn. She is profoundly exhausted, the adrenaline of the meeting having worn off completely. Upon arriving at the palace, she is so drained that Birgitte has to carry her from her horse. Her intention to go directly to bed is thwarted by a frantic Halwyn Norrie. He brings urgent news that shatters her exhaustion. 4 small armies, numbering 20 to 30,000 soldiers, are approaching Caemlyn from the east and will arrive within a week. The chapter ends with Elaine immediately shifting her focus from diplomacy to defense, snapping orders to prepare the city for a siege. Chapter 28. News in a cloth sack. The morning after Mat Cauthon agrees to help the captive Aes Sedai, he finds himself in bed with Queen Tylin, who announces her imminent departure from Abu Dar. She explains that the Shonchan High Lady Suroth, at the suggestion of the young woman named Tuon, is taking her on a tour to witness the extent of her new dominion over Altara. Their mode of travel will be the formidable flying beasts known as Torakan, capable of covering vast distances quickly. Mat feels a profound sense of relief, not from the prospect of flying, but because Tylin's absence provides him with a critical window of opportunity to enact his plans. Her absence means he can work on freeing the Aes Sedai without her constant, possessive oversight. Tylin, in her typically playful and dominant manner, jokes about tying him to the bed to ensure his safety and fidelity, a comment that Mat finds only partially humorous, highlighting the coercive nature of their relationship. Before she leaves, she dresses him in an ostentatious all-red outfit that he despises, a final assertion of her control over him as her pretty. The procession to the docks serves as a stark reminder of Mat's precarious and diminished status within the Shonchan hierarchy. While Tylin and other members of the Shonchan blood ride at the head of the column, Mat is relegated to the rear on his horse, Pips, explicitly separated from the nobility. He observes the rigid social structure around him, the haughty Suldam, the meek and subservient Dakavali servants, and most chillingly, the collared domain. He notices one domain in particular, a woman he recognizes as the former Aes Sedai Rima Galfrey, who now appears utterly broken, laughing with delight at a comment from her handler. This sight solidifies the grim reality of the Aes Sedai's fate and reinforces Mat's own internal conflict. He feels a pang of guilt over the enslaved seafolk windfinders, whose captured ships now fill the harbour under Shonchan control, but forces himself to acknowledge that he cannot save everyone and must focus on the task at hand. After a final, public, and embarrassing display of affection from Tylin, who pinches his bottom in front of everyone, her boat departs, leaving Matt with a limited time frame to act. Returning to the Tarasin Palace, Matt is immediately confronted by Noel, the old traveller, who astutely observes that Matt is formulating a dangerous plan and offers his assistance. Matt politely deflects the offer, still uncertain of the old man's motives, though he is grateful for Noel's help in a previous street fight. Noel, however, proves his value by bringing up the golem, connecting a new murder, one with a victim drained of blood, to the creature that is hunting Matt. This news amplifies the personal danger Matt is in. Almost immediately after, he catches sight of Tuon, the young Shonchan noble, watching him from down a hall before she silently glides away. Her recurring, enigmatic presence adds another layer of paranoia to his already stressful situation. In a symbolic act of reclaiming his identity, Matt has his servants retrieve his own practical, well-made clothes and sheds the garish outfits Tylin forced upon him. He then summons the thief-catcher Juilin and lays out the core of his plan. He needs an Adam, a domain dress, and 3 Suldam dresses to disguise the 3 Aes Sedai and smuggle them out of the city. Motivated by the desire to rescue his own love interest, a Dakavol named Thera, Juilin reluctantly agrees to procure the illicit items. The following days are a cascade of frustrating obstacles and escalating tension. While Matt's public intention to run away from Tylin serves as a useful cover story to protect the Queen from suspicion, the palace staff, loyal to her, actively try to hinder him. A far greater complication arises in the form of Beslan, Tylin's son, who reveals his own reckless scheme to incite a citywide rebellion against the Shonchan. Matt and Tom Merrilin are forced to talk him down, arguing that a civilian uprising would be a bloody slaughter, not a heroic tale. They manage to secure only a tenuous promise from him to wait. Meanwhile, their own escape plan hits a series of walls. Tom discovers that while the blood can move Damain freely, Suldam require a specific, officially sealed order from a high-ranking officer to take one through the city gates, and they have no way to acquire or forge such a document. Their search for women willing to pose as Suldam also fails, as Tom's informant decides to marry a Shonchan general, and Juilin's beloved Thera is too traumatized to participate. With 6 of his 10 days gone, Matt is left with no clear path forward. The pressure intensifies dramatically as the golem strikes again, this time leaving a victim in a public alley. The city erupts in panic, and the populace demands more Shonchan patrols, making a clandestine escape at night nearly impossible. Tom also learns through his network of listeners that the secretive seekers for truth have been officially tasked with catching the killer, adding another layer of dangerous scrutiny to their environment. Matt is left with what feels like only 2 days before Tylin's potential early return, his plan in shambles and the city becoming a tightening net. He paces in his chambers, his leg aching, feeling utterly defeated by the impossible odds. Just as his hope is dwindling to nothing, Juilin appears. He carries a simple cloth sack, and inside it are 2 dresses and the gleaming silver length of an Adam, the first concrete piece of their plan to fall into place, and a desperately needed glimmer of possibility in the encroaching darkness. Chapter 29. Another Plan. The chapter opens in the claustrophobic, shadow-filled basement of the Wandering Woman, where a tense meeting is underway between Matt, Jolene, her 2 warders Fen and Blerick, and the innkeeper Setale Anan. The subject of their dispute is Matt's proposed escape plan, which hinges on Jolene, an Aes Sedai, willingly wearing an Adam, the very instrument of Shonchan enslavement. Jolene is vehemently opposed, her initial haggard appearance now replaced by a cold fury after a week of proper care. She views the plan not as a rescue, but as an offer of a noose, terrified of being rendered helpless should anything go wrong. Matt, frustrated by her resistance to what he considers a practical solution, brandishes the silver leash and collar, causing Jolene to recoil as if from a serpent. Her 2 warders, the Saldean Fen and the Shienaran Blerick, stand as a united, menacing front. Despite their physical differences, They are described as being like two peas in a pod, in thought and action, their protective gazes on Matt resembling lions watching a goat. They flatly state that if Jolene does not want to wear the device, she will not wear it. The stalemate is broken by Setal Anan, who surprisingly unleashes a tirade against the Aes Sedai. She chastises Jolene for behaving like a sniveling novice, throwing tantrums rather than a grown woman, or an Aes Sedai, declaring her own intent to see Jolene return to the White Tower by any means necessary. Setal also reveals the depth of her own commitment and hatred for the Shonchan regime. She began the process of selling her in shortly after their arrival and has already sent her husband, Jasfer, and all their relatives away on his fishing boats, coasting towards Ilion. This act of familial exodus eliminates what Matt had considered a last resort backup plan. The confrontation is interrupted when Jolene, studying the innkeeper, remarks that her voice sounds familiar. Ignoring this, Setal decides they must at least test if she possesses the ability to be a Suldam, as not all women do. After Matt, with some remembered difficulty, shows her how to operate the collar and bracelet's complex catches, Setal fastens the bracelet to her own wrist and the collar around Jolene's neck. The result is immediate and catastrophic. Jolene collapses, writhing in silent agony on the stone floor as her warders rush to her side, massaging her neck and limbs to ease the excruciating pain. The plan is a definitive, disastrous failure. Dejected, Matt leaves the basement, his mind grappling with the lack of options and the impending return of Queen Tylin. As he crosses the Mol Hara, he is unexpectedly accosted by Bael Doman, the heavy-set Ilioner ship captain from a past, unpleasant voyage. Doman, now a shaven-headed Sojin, enthusiastically ushers a reluctant Matt back into the inn and up to a private room. There, Matt finds himself before Egeanin Tamarath, a hard-faced predatory woman of the Shonchan blood, whom he also recognizes. She reveals that she is in need of a trustworthy crew for a ship and wishes to hire Matt, Tom, and Juilin, whom she knows from their time in Tanchico. Matt quickly deduces that Egeanin's urgency stems from being hunted by the seekers for truth. Seizing the opportunity, Matt turns the tables on her. He dismisses her offer of gold and instead proposes a counteroffer. He will help her vanish from the seeker's sight immediately, but in exchange, she must provide him with 3 reliable Suldam who will keep their mouths shut. After a tense moment of consideration with Doman, Egeanin agrees to his terms. Later that evening, Matt presents this new, radically altered plan to Tom and Juilin. They are both deeply skeptical, wary of trusting a Shonchan of the blood, even one they have worked with before. Juilin, particularly sour about the now useless Suldam disguises he procured, expresses his distrust of Doman as a smuggler and Sojin. To allay their fears, Tom reveals the circumstances of their association with Egeanin in Tanchico. She had provided crucial aid to them, along with Nynaeve and Elaine, in acquiring and disposing of a male Adam, an artifact the Black Ager had intended to use on Rand al'Thor. Tom uses this secret to illustrate the power of stories and rumours, explaining how a false tale about Rand swearing fealty to the White Tower could destabilise his entire position in Tyr. Reassured of Egeanin's character, they agree to the new plan. The chapter concludes with Matt lying awake in Tylin's bed, unable to sleep. He is not worried about the golem, but is instead consumed with running through the details of the new plan, keenly aware that even the most brilliant strategies can fall apart, and that true victory lies in adapting when they inevitably do. Chapter 30. Cold, Fat Raindrops. The day began under a foreboding grey sky with a cold wind, an atmosphere Matt Cawthon found more suitable for murder than for the grand escape he was planning. He attempted to reassure himself that his plan, centered on using a Shonchan noble, was foolproof. His servant, Lopen, patiently recited the finalized arrangements for him while he ate a simple breakfast. The plan dictated that Lopan and another servant, Nerim, would escort the boy Olva out of the palace through a discreet refuse gate. From there, they would proceed to the Wandering Woman Inn to gather Matt's gold and other belongings, meeting with 3 of Matt's soldiers and the horses. The entire group would then exit the city and wait for Matt at an abandoned stable on the Great North Road. Matt sternly instructed them to continue on to find the main body of his army if he did not arrive by the following sunrise, though he privately suspected their loyalty would cause them to wait longer. Matt's conversation with Olva revealed the boy's unexpected maturity. Olva was not upset about leaving his reading tutor, Riesel, explaining with simple logic that her impending marriage to a Shonchan general would have ended their lessons anyway. The boy was more concerned with carefully packing his few prized possessions, including the game of snakes and foxes his father had made for him, and securing a promise from Matt that they would play together. The plan faced a significant complication when Beslan, the Queen's son, confronted Matt. Having deduced that an escape was underway, Beslan demanded a glorious role in the action. To placate him and create a useful diversion, Matt tasked him with setting fires to Shonchan's supply stockpiles after midnight, while also insisting that Beslan establish a very public, drunken alibi to protect his mother from any repercussions. Throughout the blustery day, Matt maintained his public persona as Tylin's lazy amusement, riding his horse in endless circles in the palace stable-yard. His observations, however, caused him great concern. He noticed that Teslin, one of the captured Aes Sedai he intended to rescue, appeared broken and fearful, her usual look of defiance completely gone. This change in her demeanor introduced a dangerous uncertainty into his intricate scheme. As the weather worsened into a downpour, he gave his final instructions to his man Vanin, ordering him to flee without hesitation if any trouble erupted within the palace that night. After hours of waiting alone in the dark, Matt finally moved through the dimly lit corridors to the stable-yard rendezvous. There, he was met by Egeanin, who informed him that she had unilaterally adapted his plan. She arrived not alone, but with a larger entourage from the inn, arguing that it provided a more convincing cover in the storm. Despite his frustration at the last-minute changes, Matt accepted the new reality as they prepared to proceed with the escape. Chapter 31. What the Elfin Said. The chapter commences with Matt Colthan accompanying the Shonchan noblewoman, Egeanin, towards the palace kennels, a decision that visibly irritates her. He is supposed to be retrieving his own belongings, but he claims a brief errand in the attic. The 2 former Suldam, Renna and Seta, follow meekly, shepherded by Bael Doman, who appears tense and unarmed. Despite Egeanin's suspicion and a muttered warning, she allows Matt to proceed with his mysterious task, grumbling about men who think they can manage things better. Once his companions are out of sight in the dimly lit attic corridors, Matt executes his true plan. He slips into the room of a seafolk domain, one he remembers from a previous observation. In the pitch blackness, he finds the sleeping woman and clamps a hand over her mouth as she awakens. He whispers a crucial question, asking what she would do if her collar were removed. The woman, identifying herself as Nestel Din Sakura Southstar, fiercely declares that she would free her sisters and fight her way back to her people, her spirit reignited by his question after she had been on the verge of despair. Satisfied, Matt proposes a bargain. He asks her to wait 3 hours before acting. They seal this pact in the dark by spitting on their palms and shaking hands. He then demonstrates the mechanism to open the segmented collar, making her practice it several times before he departs, placing his faith in his gambler's luck. Upon exiting the room, Matt is confronted with a terrifying scene. He sees the back of an unfamiliar, grey-haired Suldam who is speaking with Egeanin. Nearby, the Aes Sedai Teslin is leashed to Renna, trembling with fear. Egeanin, however, masterfully handles the situation, projecting an air of authority as she informs the senior Suldam that she is acting on High Lady Suroth's orders to commandeer any domain she wishes, specifically naming Teslin. Her confident deception works, and the Der Suldam accepts the explanation, however confused she seems. Matt, holding his breath the entire time, seizes the opportunity to retreat silently down the stairs. Overcome with relief and adrenaline, he then rushes through the palace halls, his haste causing him to crash into a table and shatter a vase, forcing him to hobble the rest of the way to Queen Tylin's chambers. There, another shocking surprise awaits him. Tylin has returned unexpectedly. She explains that High Lady Suroth learned of a vanished army in Mirandi and returned to Ebu Dar with great urgency. Tylin confronts Matt, correctly deducing his plan to escape. In a tumultuous display of emotion, she calls him her pet fox, gives him a passionate farewell kiss, and then slaps him hard for his attempted deception. She then reveals her own clever plan to protect herself and aid his escape. She will claim he overpowered and bound her. She insists on supervising the process, ensuring the bonds are tight and her gag is secure, turning her feigned capture into a convincing performance before Matt pushes her under the bed. Matt proceeds to the designated meeting point in an anteroom near the stable yard, only to find it empty. As he prepares to brave the heavy rain, he is ambushed by Tuon, who addresses him as Toy and declares she cannot allow him to leave. A brief, intense fight ensues. Tuon, despite her small stature, proves to be a formidable hand-to-hand combatant, and Matt struggles to merely defend himself. The confrontation is interrupted by the sudden appearance of Noel, who is also fleeing and manages to restrain Tuon from behind. Together, Matt and Noel bind and gag the furious Shonchan royal. The chaos escalates as Juilin arrives with Thera, the timid Darkavala he is rescuing. Shortly after, Ejianin's party enters. Her initial frustration at the unexpected presence of Thera turns to absolute horror when she recognizes the captive Tuon. Ejianin immediately drops to her knees, revealing the girl's true identity. She is the daughter of the Nine Moons, the heir to the Crystal Throne. At this revelation, the other Shonchan also prostrate themselves, forcing the leashed Aes Sedai to the floor as well. The name strikes Matt with the force of a physical blow as he realizes the Elfin's prophecy is coming true. He numbly declares to the stunned room, "She is my wife." The situation is further complicated by the arrival of Tuon's Sojin, Selucia, who, after a moment of panic, calmly pledges obedience to Matt on the condition that he does not harm her mistress. Faced with this monumental and dangerous complication, Matt abandons the idea of leaving Tuon behind. He announces that they are taking both her and her attendant with them. The chapter concludes with Tuon looking at him and smiling, a secret, knowing expression that sends a shiver down his spine. Chapter 32. A Portion of Wisdom. The narrative opens within the Golden Wheel, a large inn located near the Yavarin market in Farmading, a city where commerce and finance are exclusively the domain of women. The common room is mostly empty, its patrons a mix of foreign male merchants and the local female bankers and traders they are meeting with. Rand al'Thor is present, covertly continuing his search for the renegade Ashaman who attempted to assassinate him. After weeks of fruitless inquiries, he receives a flicker of hope when a serving man tentatively identifies one of the men from his drawings, though the information is uncertain. While waiting, Rand overhears several conversations that paint a picture of the wider world's anxieties. A Tyran merchant is being reassured that political turmoil in Andor will not escalate to war, and Ilyana discusses unsettling rumors of plague and the involvement of Aes Sedai in Mirandi's instability, and a Kandori fur trader expresses concern over news that the Dragon Reborn has been crowned in Ilion and that the Stone of Tyr is now under siege. Frustrated and isolated, Rand reflects on his situation. His companions, Min, Nynaeve, and Olivia, have all but given up the hunt, believing the remaining assassins have fled. They have been urging him to leave Farmading for days. Internally, Rand struggles with the voice of Luz Therin Telamon in his head, who rages against the city's lack of the One Power and accuses Rand of staying not for vengeance, but out of fear. Luz Therin suggests Rand is terrified of the mysterious sickness that afflicts him when he channels, and that this fear is preventing him from acting decisively. As Rand walks through the rain-swept streets, he is intercepted by Verin Mathwin. The Aes Sedai reveals that Cadsuane Melydrin has been spending time with Min, Nynaeve, and Olivia. More urgently, she delivers grave news that the Shon-Chan have established a significant military presence in Ilion, signaling a major strategic move. This news, coupled with the futility of his search, convinces Rand that he can no longer wait. He asks Verin to act as an intermediary, telling her to inform Cadsuane that he will be leaving the next day, and wishes for her to accompany him as his advisor. In a significant concession, he agrees to her terms, even offering an apology for his past behavior. Returning to his own inn, the council's head, Rand informs Lan of his decision. Lan reveals that Nynaeve, Min, and Olivia had deliberately sought out Cadsuane to try and bridge the gap between her and Rand, a task that has been particularly difficult for Nynaeve. When the women return, Nynaeve is unexpectedly excited, revealing that Cadsuane has identified the functions of her ter'angreal, including one she calls a well, which can store a quantity of the One power. This discovery carries the alarming implication that Cadsuane possesses a similar item and is capable of channeling even within Farmading's restrictive influence. The chapter culminates in a moment of sharp tension. The innkeeper delivers a sealed letter addressed to Min's husband, a cover for Rand. Min reads it and, with a look of grim intensity, immediately tries to throw it into the fireplace. Rand snatches it from her hand before she can. The anonymous letter is from a sympathizer who knows Rand's identity. It confirms that 2 of the assassins are dead and, most critically, reveals the exact location of the remaining 2, Torval and Gedwin. The chapter ends with Rand holding the very information he had just resolved to abandon his search for, now facing a stark choice between pursuing his vengeance and keeping his appointment with Cadsuane. Chapter 33. Blue Carp Street. The chapter opens with Min in a state of deep agitation, sitting on her bed and practicing a knife trick as she confronts Rand about his plan. Rand, appearing emotionally detached, is focused on studying the peace bond he has cut on his sword's scabbard. Min vehemently argues against his decision to walk into what they all acknowledge is a trap set by the renegade Ashaman, Gedwin, and Torval, quoting a folk saying about the foolishness of such an act. Rand's response is chillingly calm and strategic. He posits that a trap is only truly a trap if you are unaware of it, suggesting he can use his foreknowledge to turn the situation to his advantage. His lack of fear, or any emotional response, infuriates Min, who throws her knife past his face to provoke a reaction, but he remains completely unmoved. In a desperate attempt to break through his emotional fortress, she grabs a leather strap, threatening to beat sense into him just as Nynaeve, Lan, and Olivia enter the room. Mortified, Min hides the strap and tries to regain her composure by questioning Nynaeve's decision to let Lan accompany Rand. Nynaeve, adopting a cool and distant Aes Sedai demeanor, speaks of trusting her warder's judgment. The tension is palpable as Rand and the grim-faced Lan prepare to leave. Despite his cold exterior, Min senses a hidden fire within Rand. After the men depart, Nynaeve instructs Olivia to stay with Min before hastily running to catch up with them. Left with the seemingly childlike Olivia, who suggests a game of cat's cradle, Min waits just long enough for the others to be out of sight before announcing her own plan, to seek out Cadsuane. When Olivia attempts to stop her, citing Rand's orders, Min cleverly persuades her by referencing a previous conversation they had about the fallibility of men's logic. A blushing Olivia agrees to accompany her. The scene then shifts to Blue Carp Street, where Rand is conducting his reconnaissance. He uses the purchase of a meat pie from a street vendor as a clever pretext to gather intelligence about the bootmaker Zerem's shop. The vendor reveals that the top floor is rented out and that the tenants are locked in at night, a detail that perfectly explains the renegade's choice of location. While eating, Rand meticulously analyzes the surrounding architecture, identifying potential escape routes across the rooftops and noting the lack of direct observation from the local street guards. His surveillance pays off when he personally witnesses Gedwin and Torval entering the building, confirming their presence. Rand then reconvenes with Lan and Nynaeve, who have gathered their own intelligence confirming that the two renegades have been seen, but appear to be alone. Rand outlines his plan of assault. Nynaeve will use the one power to lift him and Lan onto the roof for a surprise attack from above. Nynaeve initially protests, wishing to join the fight herself and trusting in her magical bracelet for protection. Rand calmly challenges her, forcing her to confront the grim reality of their mission. This precipitates a crucial shift in Nynaeve's perspective, as she realizes this is not an adventure, but a necessary execution, and she quietly urges them to be as swift and merciless as possible. In a back alley, Nynaeve levitates the two men onto the roof. They gain access to the building through an attic trapdoor and discover their targets in the room below, but in a shocking twist, both Gedwin and Torval are already dead, their bodies sprawled on the floor. Rand immediately understands the truth, whispering that Padan Fain is there, a realization confirmed by the sudden agonizing throbbing of his two unhealable wounds. The objective instantly changes from eliminating renegades to confronting Fain. They burst into the main room to find not only the shrieking maniacal Fain, but also Toram Riatin, a disgraced blademaster who immediately engages Lan in a deadly duel. Fain, wielding the cursed ruby-hilted dagger from Shadar Logoth, attacks Rand. The dagger's proximity causes Rand debilitating pain, turning his fight into a sheer effort of will. Fain creates an illusion of the dead Asherman, which Rand dispels with a sword form, wounding Fain in the process. Suddenly, Fain seems to hear something, screams in a wordless rage, and flees down a staircase. Lan, having quickly and efficiently dispatched Riatin, stops Rand from giving chase, warning that the street is filling with guards. They are forced to retreat back to the roof. Their escape attempt goes horribly wrong when Lan slips on the wet slates. Rand catches him, but his own hold gives way, and the chapter ends on a cliffhanger as both men plummet toward the alley below. Chapter 34. The Hummingbird's Secret. While pretending to browse a street hawker's wares on Blue Carp Street, Nynaeve discreetly watched an alley, having made several small purchases of braid and ribbon merely to justify her loitering. Her attention was abruptly shattered by the growing clamor of street guards' rattles. A massive force of armored men, far more than a typical patrol, flooded the street, shoving people aside and even trampling one man without hesitation as they rushed toward a specific destination. Nynaeve was forcefully pushed along the wall by the throng, and to her horror, she realized the 100-strong contingent of guards had stopped directly in front of the bootmaker's shop, where Lan and Rand were. Her immediate heart-stopping fear was for Lan. She instinctively touched the jeweled belt, her well of stored power, preparing to intervene despite the odds. Before she could act, she was seized by Cadswan and Olivia, who began forcefully marching her away from the scene, with a worried Min accompanying them. Min whispered that she thought Rand had fallen unconscious and was hurt. Cadswane, pragmatic and cold, insisted they could do no good there, and that Nynaeve's earlier use of channeling, despite her belief that it would go unnoticed in Farmading, had panicked the city's leadership and led directly to the men's capture. Nynaeve's protests were met with scorn from both Cadswan and a surprisingly unsympathetic Min, who blamed her for being as wool-headed as the men. Cadswan asserted her control, promising to do what she could to free them, and threatening to have Olivia physically restrain Nynaeve if she did not comply. Meanwhile, Rand awoke in absolute darkness, disoriented and in pain. He found himself in a tiny stone cell, barely 3 paces long and 2 paces wide, with the ceiling just above his head. His gloves had been taken, a clear sign his captors knew he was the dragon reborn. The confining space triggered the panicked voice of Luz Therin in his head, screaming about being trapped in the box again. To combat the rising claustrophobia and the madness of the voice, Rand forced himself to sit in the center of the cell. He fought off a moment of horrifying weakness, where he wished for Elida's sisters to take him just to escape the box, then hardened his resolve. To forge his soul into the weapon he believed it needed to be, he began to systematically recall the names of all the women who had died because of him, starting with Moiraine Damodred and dwelling on the anguish each name brought. Later that night, Cadsuane led her own small, tense army through the hall of the councils. Her party consisted of several Aes Sedai, Nynaeve, Min, Alivia, and 3 Ashaman, whose presence with swords in the corridors caused a stir among the clerks. Min was increasingly agitated, sensing that Rand was changing, becoming as hard as iron in his confinement. Inside the council's chamber, Cadsuane confronted the first council, Alais, and the 12 other leaders. When Alais feigned ignorance about holding the Dragon Reborn, Cadsuane revealed her trump cards. First, she introduced the Ashaman, whose presence visibly terrified the councils. Then, addressing Alais's disbelief that channeling could occur in the city, Cadsuane drew on the power stored in her hummingbird, Ter Angreal, and flawlessly wove air to lift the coronet from Alais's head and set it on the floor. Nynaeve, draining her own, then dramatically returned it to the first council's head. This undeniable proof that the city's protective guardians had a flaw shattered the council's resolve. A shaken Alice capitulated completely, agreeing to release Rand into their custody. Cadsuane felt a pang of regret for having broken a good leader for Rand's sake, privately noting that the boy was accumulating a significant debt. Chapter 35. With the Chuden Cal. Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn, departed from the city of Far Madding, crossing a stone bridge with his company under a pale morning sun. An internal cold far more profound than the winter air had settled within him, a consequence of his recent imprisonment, and he wore a small, unnerving smile that had been on his face since his release. Nynaeve had previously healed his physical injuries, but his appearance still startled a guard officer, who was only placated when Cadsuane Melaidrin presented him with an official order. This document, signed by all 13 of Far Madding's councils, was an extraordinary decree that commanded the complete erasure of their party from the city's records, ordering that their names be expunged and the order itself subsequently burned, effectively making it as though they had never been there at all. As they rode, Min Farshaw attempted to offer comfort, sensing his turmoil through their bond, but Rand's response was distant and detached. He acknowledged his gratitude for the ordeal in Far Madding, comparing himself to a sword that is grateful to the forge fire for shaping it, but could never be fond of the painful process. Once clear of the city, the ever-present call of the male half of the true source, Saidin, became an undeniable hunger. Rand reached out and filled himself with its fiery, icy power, a torrent laced with the familiar corrupting taint that caused the larger wound in his side to pulse with agony. He struggled to master the raw force, a battle every male channeler must fight or perish. He could sense the 3 Ashaman with him doing the same, drinking in the power like desperate men. Luz Theron's voice in his mind sighed with relief. Min, observing his visible distress, expressed her concern, but Rand deflected with a lie, claiming he was well while inwardly recognizing he still lacked the necessary hardness to send her away for her own safety, a plan he had formulated but could not bring himself to enact. He led the group into the forest to a specific location, where he had previously buried a long, narrow bundle. Using the one power, he unearthed the object and floated it to his hand, revealing the crystal sword Kalandor. He explained that he had hidden it to avoid announcing his identity upon entering Far Madding, as the unique sword was a well-known symbol of the Dragon Reborn. With the weapon secured to his saddle, he faced his companions and made a momentous declaration. He intended to cleanse the taint from Saidin. The Ashaman reacted with hopeful excitement, while the Aes Sedai were filled with shock and apprehension. Cadsuane, however, remained impassive. Rand explained his plan involved using the Chuden Cal, a pair of legendary and immensely powerful Sa'angreal statues, one located in Caerhien and the other on the island of Tremalking. He revealed he possessed a pair of smaller Ter Angreal access keys that would allow them to tap into the Chuden Cal's power from anywhere in the world. Two of the Brown Aja sisters, Kumira and Nasun, immediately voiced their grave concerns, citing ancient texts that warned such an attempt could result in a catastrophe powerful enough to shatter the entire world. Luz Theron's internal voice shrieked in agreement, calling the plan madness. Rand countered their fears with a grim reality, reminding them of the certainty of male channelers going insane from the taint. He posed a chilling question, asking if they would prefer to face the last battle with hundreds of rabid, powerful Ashaman roaming the land, himself potentially among them. His argument was directed at the Brown sisters, but his focus remained on Cadswan, whose support he needed. When she asked where the deed would be done, he replied, "In Shadar Logoth." She nodded in grim acceptance, acknowledging it as a fitting place for an act that risked world-shattering consequences. Rand then created a gateway to a desolate hilltop several miles north of the ruined city of Aridhol. The very proximity to the cursed place caused the second, smaller wound in his side, a wound inflicted by Padan Fane's dagger from Shadar Logoth, to throb in a sickening counter-rhythm to the larger wound from Ishmael. Cadswan immediately took command, dispatching warders to scout the perimeter and securing the horses. As preparations were made, Olivia, at Cadswan's instruction, collected Nynaeve's various ter'angreal, explaining they would be useless while Nynaeve was linked to Rand and channeling the immense power of the Truiden Cal. With the preparations complete, Rand sat cross-legged before Nynaeve, who held the two access keys. He took the male figure, and she placed the female one at her feet. Following her instructions, he brought himself to the very brink of embracing Saidin, allowing her to initiate a link between them. The experience was an agony for both. Nynaeve was horrified by the chaotic, violent nature of Saidin that flooded through her, while Rand, in turn, felt Saidar for the first time. He perceived it as a tranquil river, but one that became a treacherous whirlpool the moment he tried to fight its currents, a stark contrast to the constant battle required to control Saidin. This was the first key to his plan. He had to surrender to the flow of Saidar, while simultaneously fighting to master Saidin. He realized the two halves of the power and the two evils he sought to pit against each other. The Dark One's taint and the shadow of Shadar Logoth were opposing twins. He then wove a conduit of pure Saidar, shaping it into a complex, flower-like structure that connected the male half of the source directly to the distant ruined city. Forcing the tainted Saidan into this conduit, he felt the filth begin to stir, moving slowly towards its ancient enemy. As the cleansing began, the immense flow of the One Power acted as a beacon. The Aes Sedai and Ashaman, organized into defensive circles by Cadswan, felt the power. Elza Penfell, secretly of the Black Ager, but now fanatically devoted to ensuring Rand reaches the last battle, watched in awe. Far away, a common man near Caerhaen saw the buried Sa'angreal glow like a second sun, while a woman on Tremalking witnessed the same phenomenon and believed it to be the fulfillment of prophecy. This beacon also drew the immediate and violent attention of the Forsaken. Sindain, formerly Lanfear, felt the torrent of Saidar, and, consumed by jealous rage at the thought of Rand sharing such power with another woman, instantly travelled to his location. Demandred, a great general of the Shadow, also arrived, initially planning to disrupt the weave, but hesitating upon feeling the palpable evil emanating from Shadar Logoth itself. As the Forsaken converged, Cadswan's defensive preparations were activated. Using a ter'angreal to detect channeling, she directed counterattacks. Jahar, linked with Marisi and wielding Kalandor, launched massive fireballs at the unseen enemies. Demandred was engaged by a circle, led by Dama Flynn, and forced into a tactical retreat. Other Forsaken, including a cautious Osangar and a furious Sindain, were repeatedly targeted and forced to flee. Verin's circle engaged one Forsaken, while another circle, led by Daigian, was confronted by a beautiful woman who was secretly holding Saidin, an impossibility that a young Ashaman named Eben recognized just before sacrificing his life to warn the others. Sindane eventually faced Olivia and was stunned to find herself outmatched by the former domain's incredible strength. Meanwhile, Mogadian, true to her nature as the spider, watched the unfolding chaos from a safe distance, content to observe and survive. She witnessed a colossal black dome form over Shadar Logoth, growing to an impossible size as it seemingly absorbed the light from the sky. Inside his own mind, Rand was screaming, drowning in an ocean of vileness as the entirety of the taint flowed through him. He clung to control by a thread. On the hilltop, Nynaeve finally collapsed from exhaustion. As Cadsuane moved to aid her, momentarily weakening their defenses, Osangar saw his opportunity to strike. From a nearby crest, he prepared to unleash balefire. However, he was spotted by Elza, who, recognizing him as the former Ashaman Corlan Dashiva, drew upon the full power of Kalandor and obliterated the entire hilltop he was on in a single cataclysmic explosion. At that moment, the black dome over Shadar Logoth writhed with black fire before collapsing into nothingness with a thunderous roar, unleashing a powerful wind that swept across the landscape. In the aftermath, the taint was gone from Sidene. The female access key lay shattered and melted, and where Shadar Logoth had once stood was now a vast, perfectly round crater. The victory came at a cost. Kumira and young Eben were dead. Rand and Nynaeve lay unconscious, recovering from their monumental effort. As Dama and Jahar confirmed with joyous certainty that Sidene was finally clean, Cadsuane made plans to leave, her objective achieved. Night fell on the quieted battlefield, on the tomb of a dead city, and on a world where the word began to spread that the time of illusions was finally at an end.